Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere cold. Colder than your frozen burrito regrets in the inside of a 3 a.m. gas station. We're going back to a time when winter didn't just mean layering up for a pumpkin spice latte run. It meant real danger, like frostbite and famine danger. Welcome to a medieval village in the dead of winter. Spoiler alert, you probably won't survive this. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I mean, don't do it just because your fingers are too cold to click away. Let me know in the comments what city you're watching from, and what time it is. Are you bundled under blankets, wearing socks to bed like a full-on adult? Good. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It starts slowly, the way all trouble does. The mornings get crisper, dew doesn't disappear after sunrise. You can see your breath now. Animals grow restless. Birds leave without saying goodbye. You keep waking up before dawn, not because you're ambitious, but because your nose is cold and it's hard to sleep when your breath keeps fogging up your own moustache. You're a villager in late 1300s England, or France. It doesn't really matter. You're rural, poor, and very, very cold. The days are short, and your wooden cottage is draftier than your neighbour's gossip. The roof leaks just a little, the shutters never quite close, and there's always a low, slow wind that finds its way through the cracks, like it's got business with your spine. Inside your one-room home, it's a situation. You've got straw on the floor, maybe a couple of hens scratching around, and your grandmother muttering to herself in the corner, either praying or plotting. You're never sure. The hearth is the heart of the house, which sounds poetic, but it really just means everyone is crowded around it, elbowing for heat. It's the only source of warmth, light, and slightly burnt stew. Outside, the landscape starts to change. Fields that once looked alive and promising now seem brittle, like they've been stunned. The dirt is too hard to dig, too dry to plant. Every morning a thin film of frost coats everything, grass, fences, your boots, and every morning it takes a little longer to shake off the cold from your bones. Your tasks don't stop just because it's unpleasant. If anything, they double. You're chopping wood until your fingers blister, because if the fire dies out in the middle of the night, you wake up not breathing. You're mending roofs, stacking dried peat, dragging hay in for animals that look at you like they know something bad's coming, which they do. This is what people mean when they say the long night. It's not a single night, it's a season, a stretch of time where sunlight is a rumour and warmth is a memory. You know winter is really here when the pond freezes solid and the chickens stop laying eggs. They're not dead, they're just smarter than you. Your clothes are, well, let's call them layered. You've got wool tunics, rough leggings, maybe a fur if you're lucky, or if you manage to outdrink the previous owner in a wager last fall. Boots. Probably leather, possibly second-hand, definitely damp. Everything smells a little off, but you stopped noticing around November. One strange thing about this whole setup, there's no real start date. The church calendar marks the big stuff, All Saints, Advent, Christmas, but winter sneaks in like a stray dog. You never catch the moment it arrives. It just is, and you endure it like your ancestors did, like their ancestors did, with a mix of fatalism and extremely low expectations. A typical day starts before sunrise because there's too much to do and not enough light to do it. You stumble out of your stiff bedding, throw on a cloak that smells vaguely of smoked ham, and start tending the fire. If it went out overnight, and it sometimes does, you have to restart it with damp kindling and prayers that may or may not be heard. Breakfast is less of a meal and more of a survival mechanism. Stale bread may be dipped in broth if you're lucky. On better days, a slice of cold pork. On worse days, just boiled water and bitterness. Then it's time to check the animals. The cows look miserable. The pigs look angry. The sheep just look resigned. You trudge through snow that comes up to your knees. Not fluffy, Instagrammable snow. Heavy, wet stuff that sticks to your leggings and tries to pull your boots off one sloppy step at a time. You slip at least once a day, but nobody laughs anymore. It's winter. Laughter is rationed. You try to keep up with repairs, patching holes in the thatch, checking the fences, setting traps for whatever might still be moving out there. A rabbit, maybe, or a fox, or something less specific and more concerning. You pretend you don't hear scratching under the floorboards. Could be rats, could be worse. Evening comes absurdly early. The sun dips below the tree line while you're still thinking about lunch. You light tallow candles or oil lamps which don't smell great, and sit around the fire again. Everyone tells the same stories. Your uncle swears he saw a witch in the woods. Your cousin claims he dreamed of spring. No one believes either. The hardest part of the season isn't the cold or the hunger, it's the stillness. The sense that the world has stopped spinning and won't start again until it decides whether you're still worth the effort. It's waiting for death, but in a really passive-aggressive way. Historically speaking, winters like these weren't just uncomfortable, they were deadly, especially during the so-called Little Ice Age, a weird, poorly understood climatic hiccup that chilled Europe from about the 14th to the 19th centuries. Crops failed, rivers froze, and people got very into praying for mild Februaries. Fringe theory of the night. Some folks, mainly the charmingly paranoid ones, believed harsh winters were signs of divine punishment, that the earth itself was rejecting human sin by turning as cold as their hearts. Others blamed witches, of course. When in doubt, witch. And here's your scholarly debate to chew on with your boiled barley. Historians still argue over how much climate change affected the collapse of rural medieval life. Was it weather, war, or just centuries of bad decision-making piling up like firewood? No one agrees, and no one probably ever will. But for now, you pull your cloak tighter, nudge your feet closer to the fire, and settle in for another night of not freezing to death. Hopefully. The frost comes suddenly, as it always does. One morning you step outside expecting the usual slick mud, and instead hear a soft crack underfoot. The top crust of the earth frozen solid. The breath you exhale hangs in the air like a ghost deciding whether to stay. You tug your cloak tighter, and just like that the season turns. It's not a dramatic arrival. No howling blizzard or bone-snapping chill. It's subtle, quiet. Like winter doesn't need to announce itself because it already owns everything. The urgency sets in fast. Everyone in the village knows the game. Get what you can now or spend February gnawing on boiled leather. The last of the crops are still in the ground, what's left of them anyway. A few root vegetables mostly, cabbage, turnips, maybe some hardy onions clinging to life out of pure spite. You and your neighbours head into the fields with your dullest tools and duller hopes, digging up frozen dirt with fingers you can barely feel. The sun gives you maybe 6 hours to work with. Half that if you want to see what you're doing. The harvest is pitiful. Nothing like the bountiful depictions carved into church walls or painted into books you'll never afford to read. Those show peasants smiling with baskets of wheat like they've just won medieval bingo. Your reality is more gritted teeth and quiet swearing. You pull up misshapen carrots, fist-sized turnips, and a handful of tubers so gnarled they look like they've already lived through something traumatic. Still, you gather what you can. Every edible thing gets collected, nothing wasted. Even the frostbitten leaves are torn off and tossed into the stew pot. You dry herbs over the fire, you pickle what's pickleable, and you pray your salted meat holds out longer than your patience. The communal granary is locked tight, the key held by the reeve, who always looks just a little too well fed for someone who's just like us. Animals have to be considered too. You can't feed them all winter, there isn't enough grain or hay, so hard choices get made. The older, weaker livestock are slaughtered before the deep cold sets in, their meat salted or smoked, their skins tanned, their bones saved for broth or tools. It's not cruelty, it's calculation. You count calories like they're coins. You think about next spring with the nervous optimism of someone who's already planning their excuses. Inside, your home transforms. It becomes less of a dwelling and more of a bunker. You seal gaps in the walls with mud and moss. You nail cloth over the windows. Well, window, singular, and more of a hole, really. You stack wood as high as it'll go and try not to think about how fast it'll vanish. Your bed gets stuffed with more straw, more rags. Blankets multiply. People too, actually. It's not uncommon for 3 generations to sleep in the same bed. Not for affection, but for warmth. You become a sandwich of unwashed bodies and wool, hoping group body heat offsets the frost seeping in through the stone floor. Evenings now revolve entirely around conserving energy. There's not much to do, which is both a blessing and a kind of slow psychological torture. You talk a little, maybe sing if someone's feeling bold. You mend things by firelight, or peel root vegetables like it's an act of spiritual reflection. Your aunt has taken to knitting socks while humming the same 3-note melody on a loop. You've considered staging an intervention. By mid-December, the ground is too hard to dig. You try anyway, after all you still need fire pits, privies, and occasionally graves. But it's like chipping at granite with a spoon. When someone dies, and they will, you store the body in a makeshift crypt or cellar until thaw comes. No one says it, but everyone knows. That's why you don't joke about dying in the winter. It's not funny, it's logistics. And then there's the wind. Not the gusty kind that rattles windows, but the low, endless moan that wraps around your cottage like a warning. It slithers down chimneys, sighs under doors, and whistles through cracks with the persistence of someone who knows you can't ignore them forever. It's not loud enough to keep you awake, just persistent enough to remind you what's waiting outside. The psychological pressure builds. You try to stay focused, on chores, on routine, on not letting your thoughts wander too far into the future. Because the future, in winter, isn't guaranteed. You start measuring time in a different way. How much dried meat is left, how many candles remain, how many more days you can stretch a single wheel of cheese. When you run out of anything, it's not just an inconvenience, it's an emergency. Historically, late autumn was a frantic time for every medieval peasant across Europe. The final harvest was called the gleaning, and it involved more than just food. People collected firewood, thatch, dung for fuel, and even dried leaves for bedding. Anything with a practical use was hoarded. Families tracked their stores like treasure, and shortages often began long before the snow arrived. Your quirky fact of the night: some communities kept winter animals, pigs or cows that weren't just food but warmth providers. You'd sleep near them, even under the same roof, hoping their body heat would help you survive the night. If you're wondering what it's like to share a bedroom with a cow, imagine snoring, flatulence, and the occasional midnight moo. It's like a sleepover, but everyone's slightly annoyed. Debates still swirl among historians about the exact timing of the agricultural calendar and how much it varied region to region. Some argue that climate change was so unpredictable during the Little Ice Age that even well-established planting seasons had to shift. Others claim it was more about local superstition, lunar cycles, or trial and error passed down through generations. What's clear is that no matter how you planned, winter always found a way to complicate things. So you sit there on your creaky wooden stool staring into a fire that's already shrinking. You think about what's left to do, how many days until the solstice, and whether or not your cousin still has that secret stash of dried apples he swore he wasn't hiding. You make mental notes, you count potatoes, you breathe out into the cold room and watch your breath linger like a little ghost of all your quiet worries. Outside, the stars are unusually bright, pinpricks in the blackest sky you've ever seen. The kind of cold clarity that makes you feel very small, very temporary, but also kind of calm. Because as terrifying as winter is, it's honest. It doesn't pretend to be kind, it just is. And somehow, despite everything, so are you. It doesn't take long before the inside of your home starts smelling. Lived in. Very lived in. There's the tang of smoke that never fully leaves, clinging to your clothes and hair. A constant undercurrent of damp wool. And then, unmistakably, the rich perfume of animal dung. Because remember, this isn't just your house. It's also the temporary winter home of 2 goats, 3 chickens, and a young pig with a limp that everyone insists is just charming. You share everything now. Not just warmth and food, but space, air, noise. You and the animals live cheek by jowl in the single-room cottage, huddling for survival. The idea is simple. More breathing things equals more body heat. The execution, however, is less romantic. Chickens flap into your face while you sleep. The goat chews the corner of your blanket. And the pig, well, the pig is not housebroken, and you've simply stopped trying. It's messy, and aromatic, and surprisingly loud. Someone is always coughing. Someone else is always muttering a prayer. The fire crackles. The animals snort. Your little brother talks in his sleep. You've started to hallucinate the sound of silence like it's some mythical creature. Bathing, of course, is a distant memory. You scrub your hands with cold water if there's some to spare. Your face gets wiped with a rag you're pretty sure doubles as a cleaning cloth. You change clothes less out of hygiene and more out of necessity. Like when your tunic freezes stiff after a trip to the outhouse, and you need to physically peel it off. Personal space? That's a summer concept. Food preparation is done right there in the middle of it all, squatting near the fire while dodging chicken droppings and hoping no one kicks over the pot. You boil everything. Vegetables, scraps of meat, old bones, stale bread. The resulting stew smells decent, earthy, familiar. You try not to think too hard about what's actually in it. If it's hot and it doesn't kill you, it counts as a win. Some days the floor is frozen when you wake up. Literal ice on the inside of your house. You scrape it away with the back of a spoon, trying not to chip the wood. When the wind is especially fierce, the shutters rattle so hard you think they'll come off. One did last year, and you spent 3 days with a canvas tarp nailed over the hole and a goat trying to eat it from the inside. Despite all this, or maybe because of it, you adapt. Your body learns the rhythm of surviving winter. Move less, sleep more, eat slow, conserve everything. You develop a deep, almost reverent relationship with the hearth. It's the centre of life. You feed it scraps of wood like offerings to an old god. In return, it gives you warmth and soup. It's a fair trade. Occasionally you clean. Not out of vanity, but survival. Too much filth attracts things you don't want. Lice, fleas, sickness. You sweep with a bundle of twigs, swat at cobwebs with a wet cloth, and throw ashes on the dirt floor to soak up smells and moisture. It works. Kind of. Not really. But again, better than nothing. And yet, in the middle of all the mess and stink, there's something oddly comforting. Familiar. You've grown up in this after all. These smells, these sounds, this chaos, it's not elegant, but it's yours. You don't know what clean means beyond what the priest says about sin. You don't know what quiet is unless everyone's asleep or dead. This is life, exactly how it's always been. Historically, homes like yours weren't designed for beauty or privacy. They were machines for survival. One-room cottages built from whatever was around. Wood, mud, stone, straw. The roofs leaked, the floors were dirt, and the furniture consisted of benches, beds stuffed with straw, and a few hooks for hanging tools or herbs. In winter, the whole system turned into a pressure cooker of smell, smoke, and skin contact. Your quirky fact of the night. Medieval people genuinely believed that bathing in winter was dangerous. Not just unpleasant, dangerous. They thought it opened your pores to the bad airs, allowing sickness to sneak in. So if you thought winter baths were rare because of the cold, well, they were also a public health hazard according to the wisdom of the time. Which means you're not gross, you're responsibly cautious. Of course, scholars still debate how accurate this filthy Middle Ages image really is. Some argue that peasants were cleaner than we give them credit for, citing old bathhouse records and hygiene-related laws. Others say no, the general public was too overworked and under-resourced to prioritise hygiene. But one thing they agree on? Winter was a time when survival beat cleanliness every single time. There's another layer to all this. Dignity. You feel it slipping sometimes, especially when you're digging a latrine in frozen ground, or when your aunt uses her own slipper to swat the pig off the stew pot. You laugh about it because the alternative is just sinking into despair. But underneath the jokes, there's a constant pressure not to fall apart, to stay human in an environment that wants to grind you down into something more animal, and that's what the smell really is. Not just sweat and smoke and dung. It's desperation. It's evidence. It's a record of what you've endured, day after day, night after night. The house is heavy with it. You are heavy with it. But so is everyone else, and there's some comfort in knowing you're not alone in your stink and stubbornness. At night, lying shoulder to shoulder with family and livestock, you sometimes wonder what it would be like to live differently. In a big stone house with separate rooms, with linen sheets and perfumed water, with quiet, with privacy. Then your brother farts loudly in his sleep and the pig oinks in protest, and the thought drifts away like smoke through the roof beams. The wind howls again outside, the shutters creak. The fire pops loudly enough to wake the baby, who begins to wail immediately. The goat sneezes, someone sighs, and you, curled under 3 blankets and a goat-smelling cloak, think to yourself, we made it through another day. It's not much. But in a medieval winter, it's everything. Somewhere between the 2nd week of frost and the 5th consecutive meal of turnip stew, you start to appreciate the little things. A warm spot by the fire that no one's claimed yet. Bread that isn't entirely hard. A stretch of daylight that lasts a whole 5 hours. And most of all, body heat. Glorious, smothering, slightly sweaty body heat. You've always known it was essential, but now you understand it on a spiritual level. Without central heating, your greatest source of warmth is other people. Literally. You sleep in a human pile, arms tangled, legs overlapping, breath warm enough to create a little fog under the blankets. Your younger sister hogs space. Your grandmother kicks in her sleep. Your uncle snores like a dying bear. But hey, No one's shivering to death, so that's a win. You also huddle close during the day. When you eat, when you mend clothes, when you do your spinning or carving or idle gossiping, you do it in clumps like sleepy sheep. The smaller the space, the more bodies you cram into it. Personal space? That left with the last of the apples in October, but you do what you can to keep cosy. You wrap yourself in layers, wool tunics, coarse leggings, cloaks that double as blankets. If you're lucky, you have fur-lined boots. If not, you wrap your feet in cloth and hope for the best. You make mittens from old scraps and patch holes with anything remotely fabric-like. There's no such thing as matching socks, or even socks really. Your clothing is held together by thread and hope. And then there's the beer. Glorious, cloudy, weak beer. Not the party kind, the survival kind. It's not about getting drunk, although you occasionally do, accidentally. It's about calories and warmth. Water's risky. It can go foul quickly and make you sick. But beer is safe. It's boiled. It's fermented. It tastes okay-ish. And best of all, it's warm in your belly. Most villages brew their own, in little batches, using barley or wheat or whatever grain you didn't eat last week. You drink it morning, noon, and night, sometimes even warmed by the fire. Children drink it. Elders drink it. Even the priest sips a mug now and then, though he pretends it's for communion practice. And yes, it helps with sleep. You finish a mug, feel the burn in your chest, and suddenly the pig snoring and the wind outside seem a little less offensive. The flicker of firelight turns cosy. Your body loosens, your eyes droop, you sigh. It's almost enough to make winter feel tolerable. Almost. You get clever too. Everyone does. You learn where the warm spots are. The wall near the chimney, the place under the loft where the heat collects, the space between the dog and the hay bale. You heat stones in the fire and wrap them in cloth to tuck under your blankets at night. You make foot warmers out of bricks. You use every part of the animal you butchered last month, even the hide, which now serves as a thick rug beside the hearth. And still, the cold sneaks in. It clings to your toes and fingers, no matter how many layers you wear. You get these little white patches on your skin where the blood won't go anymore. Your nails turn blue. Your lips crack. There's a deep, aching chill that lives inside your bones and doesn't care how many blankets you pile on top. That's when you start to dream of summer. Not the actual season, but the memory of warmth. You imagine sunlight on your face. You remember the feel of dirt between your toes, the sound of bees, the smell of sweat that wasn't caused by indoor livestock. And for a second, just a second, your body almost believes it. Now here's your quirky fact of the night. In some regions of medieval Europe, folks believed that sharing body heat with animals, especially dogs, was good luck and even medicinal. Dogs were seen as warm creatures, gifted by nature to ease rheumatism and chill. There are accounts of people literally strapping small dogs to their legs at night for warmth. You, personally, have a goat that keeps trying to lick your toes, which is either affectionate or ominous. And speaking of warmth, there's a bit of historical confusion about how people really heated their homes. Yes, there were hearths and braziers and even some early chimneys, but insulation was not a priority. Some homes had smoke holes instead of flues, meaning the fire would burn and fill the room with smoke until it finally found its way out. Cozy, right? Historians still debate how effective these heating methods really were. Some argue that fires were mostly symbolic, giving off light and illusion more than real heat. Others claim people used beds like insulation cocoons, tucking in with so many layers of wool, linen, fur and family members that the actual room temperature didn't matter. The truth, like most things in medieval life, is probably somewhere in between. Inefficient, uncomfortable, but just barely enough. And just when you think you've got a handle on it, when you're 3 mugs of beer in, your feet are toasty against a goat's backside, and your cloak has achieved maximum blankethood, someone opens the door. Cold air rushes in like a slap. Everyone yells. Someone curses. The chickens panic. The baby starts crying. And the person standing in the doorway just shrugs like they didn't just invite death into your home. That's winter etiquette in the village. Never, ever open the door without warning. It's not just rude. It's dangerous. Warmth is precious. Letting it escape is practically treason. You learn to scowl at the draft like it's a thief. You build little entryways with spare cloth, hang blankets like curtains, wedge straw under the door gap, anything to keep the cold out, and still, it finds you, always. At night the wind rises again. It sounds almost human now, like someone wailing in the distance. You curl tighter under your layers, your knees pressed to your chest, your hands tucked into your sleeves. You feel the warmth of the person beside you. You try to pretend you're back in the fields, barefoot with the sun on your face. But instead, the cold presses in from all sides like it knows where you live, and unfortunately it does. You wake up not because of noise or movement or a bad dream, though there's plenty of those, but because your face is cold. Not just chilly, but numb. The kind of cold that makes your skin feel stiff, like it belongs to someone else. You open your eyes and find that the fire has gone out sometime in the night. The last embers are just soft red glows beneath a layer of grey ash. It's still dark, or maybe barely dawn. You can't tell. Winter doesn't do sunlight so much as it does vague lightishness. The air in the cottage is sharp enough to bite. You can see your breath with every exhale, little ghostly clouds rising from the pile of blankets and bodies. Someone snores. Someone else coughs. The goat is sleeping peacefully, which feels unfair. You shift a little, trying not to wake the others, and then immediately regret moving. The air rushes into your cloak, chilling every inch of exposed skin. This is the worst part of winter, not the storms, not the snow, but the endless dragging dimness. Days don't begin so much as they unfold, slowly, like a reluctant scroll. The sun rises late and sets early, and even when it's up it barely makes an appearance. Just a pale, watery disk low on the horizon, casting a blue-grey glow over everything. It's light, but not warm. Like someone tried to paint daylight and gave up halfway through. You shuffle to the hearth and begin the sacred morning ritual, reviving the fire. You scrape away the ash, coax the remaining embers into something vaguely alive, and carefully stack kindling on top. You blow gently, hoping not to inhale soot again. Last time you choked for 20 minutes and had to explain the blackened teeth. Eventually the fire catches. The flame flickers weakly at first, then grows. The room begins to shift from a cave of shadows to a proper living space, or at least something slightly less miserable. The others start to stir, groans, sniffling, shuffling bodies. Morning in the medieval winter village isn't about sunshine and singing birds. It's about cracked lips, aching joints, and the question, is there any bread left? Usually there isn't, or if there is, it's gone rock hard and has to be dipped in hot broth just to be chewable. The children complain of cold feet. Your aunt complains of stiff knees. Your grandfather claims he remembers a winter colder than this one, back when wolves came right into the village and ate a cow in broad daylight. No one believes him, but it's comforting to pretend things have been worse. You go outside, not because you want to, but because someone has to check the animals, break the ice on their water troughs, and see if any snow has caved in the roof of the chicken coop again. The cold hits you like a physical object the second you open the door. The sky is white-grey, like the belly of a storm, and the air smells metallic, sharp and sterile. Snow crunches under your boots, each step echoing loudly in the stillness. Everything is muffled, wrapped in layers of frost. You look around and realise something strange. The village is almost silent. No dogs barking, no carts creaking, just the distant caw of a crow and the occasional creak of tree limbs under frost. This is what deep winter does. It doesn't just freeze the world, it silences it. Even the birds know better than to sing. That silence gets to you after a while. It's not peaceful, it's oppressive, like the earth has paused its breath and is waiting for something. You look toward the woods, where bare branches claw at the sky like black veins. You know better than to wander out there now. Paths are covered. Landmarks vanish, and if the cold doesn't get you, something else might. Historically, this time of year, midwinter, the weeks before and after the solstice, was when people began to really feel the emotional strain of the season. Not just physical hardship, but a kind of spiritual exhaustion. You're halfway through, but you're not sure if that means you're close to relief or just further from the start. The weight of the dark presses in. People grew more irritable, more fearful, more prone to see shadows moving that weren't there. Your quirky fact tonight? Some medieval folks genuinely believed the sun stopped moving this time of year, that it hovered low on the horizon, uncertain whether to return. The solstice was seen as a moment of great tension, when people would light fires, hold rituals, and pray like their lives depended on it. Because in some ways, they did. Scholars still debate how seriously villagers took astronomical events. Some say rural people had a strong intuitive grasp of seasonal shifts, tied to planting cycles and religious calendars. Others argue most peasants didn't care about the stars unless they were falling out of the sky. But the emotional importance of light, or its absence, was undeniable. Back inside, you scrape frost off the inside of the window with a bit of bone. You press your forehead to the glass and stare out at the endless pale nothing. Another grey day. Another long wait for warmth. You think about how much you've changed since autumn. How your body has grown leaner, your skin rougher, your thoughts quieter. You think about the last time you truly saw the sun, saw it, felt it. Not just the pale impersonator that floats low in the sky now. The real sun. The one that warms your neck, bakes the earth, makes you sweat and squint and complain. You miss complaining about being too hot. What a luxury. Then you hear the church bell. Faint but distinct. It tolls once. Then again. It's time for morning prayers, or maybe a funeral. Honestly, in winter, it's hard to tell the difference. But the bell's sound cuts through the silence like a promise. You're not dead yet. And that, for now, will have to do. You pull your cloak tighter, stir the fire, and get on with it. Another dim day in a frozen world. Another quiet victory. By mid-January, snow covers everything in sight. Not the pretty postcard kind. The deep, crusty, dirty kind that swallows roads, fences, and sometimes entire carts if you're not watching where you drive. You step outside and it's all white. White sky, white ground, white roofs, white trees. Even the air feels bleached. It's not just cold anymore. It's colourless, weightless, like the entire world has been erased and replaced with snow. And it's quiet. Not peaceful quiet. Eerie quiet. Sound doesn't travel the same way over snow. Everything is muffled, softened, like the land is holding its breath. You shout across the yard and your voice just sort of vanishes. No echo, no bounce, just swallowed by the whiteness. Your village, usually a collection of muddy paths and noisy people, is transformed into a series of snow-covered humps. You can barely tell where one roof ends and another begins. The path to the well. Gone. The shortcut through the orchard. Erased. Everything's buried. You have to stomp new paths every morning with frozen boots, each step sinking into the drifts with a crunch that echoes inside your bones. You hate snow. You try not to admit it out loud because kids still find it magical, and old folks call it God's blanket, or something poetic. But you know better. Snow means work. It means your boots are always wet, your socks always stink, and every trip outside is a calculated risk. You have to shovel it off your roof before it collapses. You have to dig it out of the chicken coop so the hens don't freeze. You have to haul wood through it, feed animals in it, and occasionally find your drunk uncle asleep in it. Snow isolates too. The village shrinks. Visits between households drop off. Even the bold ones, the gossipy ones, the flirtatious ones, the busybodies go quiet. A trip to the neighbour's house becomes an expedition. You wrap up in every piece of clothing you own, brace yourself against the wind, and trudge through snow up to your thighs, only to arrive and find out they're just as miserable as you are. But at least you shared that misery in person, and that's something. Some days a wind kicks up and everything you just shoveled disappears under a fresh drift. It howls across the flat fields, sweeping fine snow like powdered glass through every crack and cranny. You have to squint, lower your head, and walk like a sleepwalker just to make it to the barn without freezing your eyelids open. The woods look beautiful in the snow, tall, quiet, still. But don't be fooled. They're more dangerous now than ever. The usual landmarks are hidden. Trails are covered. It's easy to walk 10 steps too far and vanish into the white. A neighbour did that last winter, went to check his traps, never came back. They found his body in April, curled beneath a fallen branch, like he'd just decided to lie down and wait out the thaw. Still, some folks venture out into the trees to check for firewood, forage for kindling, or even set traps for rabbits and foxes. The meat is lean and the work is miserable, but a fresh kill means something warm for dinner and a pelt for patching clothes. You tried trapping once, you caught a squirrel, it bit you. You didn't try again. Sometimes the snow works in your favour. It seals your roof like insulation, makes your damp, drafty home slightly less miserable. It covers the animal dung in the yard, hides the rotting vegetables, makes everything look clean. If you squint, your village almost looks like something out of a noble's painting. Smoke curling up from chimneys, the gentle curve of hills, the sparkle of morning frost. Almost. Historically, this deep part of winter was the most psychologically intense, not just physically exhausting, but emotionally strange. People began to see things in the snow, shapes, faces, figures, days blurred together, sleep patterns unravelled. The monotony, combined with the cold and isolation, led to something like seasonal madness. Some called it snowsick. Others didn't have a name for it. They just endured. And here's your quirky little snow fact for the night. In some parts of medieval Europe, people believed that heavy snowfall meant God was baking bread in heaven, and the snowflakes were crumbs drifting down from his table. That's adorable, sure, until you realise that meanwhile you're actually eating boiled cabbage and chewing bark to keep your teeth busy. There's also debate among historians about just how snow-locked medieval villages got. Some records describe total isolation for weeks, with no travel possible. Others suggest people were surprisingly mobile, using skis, sleds, or just sheer stubbornness to keep moving. Maybe it varied village to village. Maybe it just depended on how desperate you were to get somewhere. Back in your own frozen corner of the world, you try to keep busy. You carve things, wooden spoons, charms, pegs for broken furniture. You help your mother mend clothes. You take turns scraping frost off the inside of the shutters. You make snowballs and immediately regret it when your fingers freeze. Then you do it again anyway. One day, you catch your reflection in the half-frozen wash basin. Your cheeks are red. Your nose is raw. Your eyes look older somehow, like winter has been slowly etching lines into your face, one snowflake at a time. You're not even halfway through the season, but you already feel like a survivor, like someone who's done battle with the elements and barely held the line. At night you lie awake and listen to the wind push snow against the door. You wonder what the world looks like beyond the hills, if other villages are just as buried, just as silent, just as cold. You wonder if the snow ever stops somewhere out there, if there's a patch of green earth untouched by frost. You imagine warmth not as a sensation, but as a place. A room full of sunlight, a bed without straw, a door that doesn't rattle. You picture yourself walking through a field of grass barefoot, and you swear you can almost feel it. Almost. Then the wind howls again, and your nose goes numb, and the pig snores beside you, and you remember where you are. Deep in winter, buried in snow. One small breath at a time. You hear them before you see them. Low growls and sharp yips echoing through the trees. At first, you think it's the wind again, because the wind always makes noises you wish it didn't. But then it comes again, unmistakable this time, closer and more alive. Wolves. You freeze mid-step, 1 foot half buried in snow, the bucket in your hand trembling just enough to slosh water onto your boot. It freezes almost immediately. Everyone knew they'd be back this year. They always come back when the cold bites hard and food runs scarce in the forests. You pretend not to be afraid, but when the sun dips low and you're still outside, you walk a little faster. You keep the axe in your hand, even if you're only gathering firewood. You listen. Constantly. You saw one last week. Just a silhouette near the tree line, barely more than a grey blur moving between the branches. It watched you, and you watched it. Both of you too frozen, literally and figuratively, to make the first move. You backed away slowly, didn't speak of it to anyone, and told yourself it was just a fox. A very large, very menacing fox. But deep down you know better. Now the village dogs bark more than they sleep. Noses pressed to doors, tails tucked tight. Some nights, they howl along with whatever's out there in the woods. It makes your skin crawl. Makes your grandmother cross herself twice and mutter something in Latin she probably doesn't fully understand. You're not the only one worried. The Reeve has organised nighttime watches, assigning people in pairs to walk the village's edge with torches and pitchforks. You got the third watch last night, between midnight and dawn, the coldest, cruelest part of the night. You walked in silence with your cousin, both of you barely awake, wrapped in every layer you could find, the torch casting shadows that kept changing shape. Nothing attacked, but something followed you. You never saw it, but the crunch of snow behind you wasn't your imagination. You didn't speak of it afterward. Some things you don't give voice to. Naming a fear makes it real. You just went inside, thawed your fingers by the fire, and hoped the noise outside was just the trees settling. Historically, wolf attacks in medieval Europe weren't just a scary story. They were a very real and very bloody part of winter life. With forest bare and prey scarce, wolves would drift closer to settlements, sniffing out pigs, chickens, goats, even unattended children. Entire chronicles exist of wolves dragging people off into the woods, never to be seen again. Whether some of those were exaggerated or not, well, it's hard to say, but the fear was real enough to last centuries. And then there's the stranger stuff. Your quirky fact for tonight. In parts of France during the 15th century, people were genuinely convinced that wolves could turn into men, or maybe it was the other way around. Werewolves weren't just folklore, they were a legal problem. People were tried and executed for lycanthropy, especially during long, brutal winters when someone, might go missing in the snow. You and your friends joke about it sometimes around the fire, when the sky's clear and the door is barred tight. You tease each other. Maybe Tom's a werewolf, someone says, elbowing him. Would explain why he eats like that. Tom laughs and rolls his eyes, but he also sleeps with a knife under his blanket now, just in case. And here's the open debate. Did wolves really become more aggressive in harsh winters, or did people simply notice them more because they had nothing else to do? Some scholars argue that wolf populations surged after the Black Death, when rural villages were abandoned and forests reclaimed the land. Others say that hunger and desperation made people more likely to exaggerate wolf sightings, or to blame missing livestock on convenient predators rather than face harsher truths like theft or neglect. You're not sure what to believe, honestly. All you know is that you've seen the prints. Big ones. Too big for a dog. Leading right up to the barn and back again, like something walked a slow, casual circle around the livestock in the dead of night. One morning you find a chicken missing. Just gone. No feathers, no blood. Just a gap in the coop and a few claw marks in the snow. Your father says it was probably a fox. Your mother says she doesn't want to talk about it. Your grandmother throws salt at the doorway and tells everyone to keep their shoes inside. You quietly sharpen your knife. Everyone has a different approach to the wolf problem. Some set traps. Others put out meat laced with poison. Dangerous, since the neighbour's dog got into one last winter and spent 3 days howling before it died. A few of the younger men want to organise a hunt, but no one has enough energy for heroics, or the right weapons, or the stomach for dragging home a wolf corpse in the snow. So instead, you wait, you listen, you watch the tree line, and sometimes when the wind dies down and the moon is bright enough to see your breath, you spot one, just standing there, watching. It never comes closer, it never runs away, it just waits. You wonder what it's thinking, if it feels the same cold you do, if it dreams of summer too, or if, unlike you, it likes this season. Maybe winter is its time. Maybe it doesn't see it as a curse but a blessing, a thinning of the world, a sharpening of instincts. You blink and the shape is gone. Back inside, the fire feels too small, the walls too thin. Every creak becomes a footstep, every shadow is a threat. You burrow deeper under your blanket, listen to the dogs, and tell yourself you'll survive another night. You always have, so far, but you keep the knife close, and you make sure the door is barred, just in case. You're not exactly starving yet, not technically, but meals are getting suspiciously smaller, and there's a growing sense of quiet calculation whenever someone brings out a pot. Your mother ladles stew with the precision of a surgeon, eyes squinting to make sure everyone gets the same amount, even if that amount wouldn't fill a hollow tooth. No one complains, not out loud anyway. But you all glance at each other's bowls when you think no one's looking. You count beans, you notice who gets more turnip and who gets more broth. Suddenly, fairness matters a lot more when your stomach's been growling since last Thursday. There's a routine now, but it's grim. A daily cycle of boiling the same handful of ingredients in new combinations and pretending it's variety. Turnips and barley, turnips and dried peas, turnips, seasoned with hope and a pinch of salt if you haven't already used it up. Every now and then, you throw in a crust of bread to bulk it up, though calling it bread is generous. It's more like a brick made of sadness. If someone slaughters a pig, the entire village perks up. You hear about it within the hour. Word spreads fast when meat is involved. People wander past the house casually, pretending they just wanted to say hello, noses twitching like wolves trying to confirm the scent. A pork bone might end up in your pot if you're lucky, or if you've got something decent to trade like a sack of barley or, more likely, a favour ode. And don't even ask about eggs. The hens have all but quit. They huddle in corners of the coop, puffed up like miserable snowballs, eyes daring you to ask for productivity in this weather. Milk is scarce too. The cows are stingy in winter, and even if they do give, the pail often comes back with more frost than cream. You get by with watered-down buttermilk and memories of actual cheese. It's feast and famine, emphasis on the famine. Holidays are the only break in the monotony, and even those are more about pretending than actually eating well. On certain feast days, like the 12 days of Christmas, you bring out whatever's left of the good stuff. Dried fruits, honey if you've got it, maybe a bit of meat that's been hoarded in the rafters for just such an occasion. You eat until you're full or until the guilt catches up. Either way, it's a temporary reprieve. Then come the fasts. Long, drawn-out, joyless stretches where you're not supposed to eat meat, or fat, or dairy. Just the spiritual staples. Fish if you can get it, lentils, bread, humility. But honestly, it's not like you were eating meat regularly anyway. Fasting is basically just your usual diet, only with more praying, and more people pretending they're doing it on purpose. The funny part, if you can call it that, is that religious feasting and fasting were both tightly woven into the calendar. The church dictated more than just Sundays. It organised your meals, feast days, saints' days, fast days. It was like God himself was your nutritionist, and he was wildly inconsistent. Today, you're meant to feast in honour of Saint someone or other. Tomorrow, you're repenting with pea soup and regret. Your quirky fact for the night: in medieval Europe, the average peasant observed over 140 fasting days a year. That's right, almost half the year. And while exceptions were sometimes made in the dead of winter, the devout still tried to follow the rules. Cold, hungry, and spiritual, that's a triple threat. You can't even sneak some bacon because everyone in your one-room house would smell it and immediately assume you've been possessed by the devil, and the devil apparently smells delicious. The food situation also varies wildly depending on where you are. Some villages are lucky, with access to fish ponds or smokehouses. Others rely heavily on preserved foods, salted meat, dried beans, root vegetables stored in cool, dark corners, and if you're really desperate, there's always acorn flour. Yes, that's a thing. Yes, it tastes exactly as awful as it sounds. Scholars still debate how bad medieval diets really were. Some argue that peasants actually ate a fairly balanced diet. Grains, legumes, vegetables, occasional meat, just in modest portions. Others say those assessments gloss over the bad years, the harsh winters, and the quiet starvation that crept into houses like yours right about now. The truth, like everything else in history, depends on whose table you're sitting at. And let's not forget the black bread. You know the stuff. Thick, coarse, slightly sour, and full of mystery. It's made with rye and barley and whatever ground-up nonsense got swept off the mill floor. Sometimes you find bits of straw or husk in it. Once you bit into something that crunched and decided not to investigate. If you're lucky, the bread is hard. If you're unlucky, it's mouldy. If you're really unlucky, it's both. There are no snacks, no second helpings, no picking at leftovers. Leftovers don't exist, they're eaten, scraped, licked clean. The pot gets swiped with fingers, the crusts get gnawed. Hunger teaches thrift in ways lectures never could. So you ration. You measure out lentils by the handful. You cut cheese with a knife so thin it doubles as a measuring tool. You save the bacon grease because it might make turnips taste slightly less like punishment, and you find yourself dreaming of food, which is possibly the cruelest trick your brain can play during a season like this. You once dreamed of honey cakes. Warm, golden, sticky with butter. You could smell them, taste them. You woke up biting your blanket, tears in your eyes, furious at your own imagination. The worst part? Your blanket tasted better than the soup you ate that morning. Still, you carry on. You eat what there is, when there is any. You smile politely when someone offers you something special, and it turns out to be roasted parsnips. Again. You help portion out the stew, stir the pot, scrape the bottom with a wooden spoon, and try not to think too hard about what hunger does to people when winter drags on too long. Because it's only January, and spring is a long way off. It starts with the sound of bells. Not soft melodic bells, but the dull iron clang of the church tower's old bronze bell, echoing across the frozen village. It doesn't ring like that for just anything. You stop mid-step, 1 foot planted in icy slush, and glance up toward the chapel. The bell tolls again, once, twice, then again. You lose count after a while, not because you're distracted, but because your heart starts pounding so loud it drowns everything else out. You know what that sound means. Everyone does. It means someone's died. The chapel stands on a slight rise, overlooking the cottages like a tired guardian. Its stone walls are rimed with frost, and the stained glass windows are fogged from the inside. Smoke curls lazily from the priest's chimney, You watch as a few villagers slowly begin trudging up the path toward it, heads bowed, cloaks wrapped tight. No one speaks. No one has to. Death in winter is expected, but it still hits like a fist. Inside your cottage, your mother hears the bell and immediately crosses herself. Your grandmother starts muttering under her breath again, something about a good death and no frost in the lungs. The baby starts crying, either from the noise or the tension in the room. You don't ask who it was, you'll find out soon enough. The roads are slick with packed snow, so you walk carefully, picking your way across the main path like you're balancing on a frozen beam. The air smells like wood smoke and damp wool. Everyone's breath forms a little cloud, and it all rises together into the still morning like a village exhale. You reach the church just as Father Oswin opens the doors. He's got that look again, the one where his eyes say he's tired of burying people, but his voice hasn't caught up yet. He greets everyone in that solemn, practiced tone, nodding slowly, as if anything faster might snap the illusion that he's somehow above all this. The bell continues to toll as the body is carried out, wrapped tightly in linen, stiff and awkward like a frozen log. You can't even tell who it is at first, just that it's small, too small. Someone whispers it was the baker's boy, 7 years old, got sick 2 days ago. Fever, then chills, then gone. They say he didn't even wake up the night before, just slipped away like breath on a window pane. That's how it goes, especially in the deep winter. Illness doesn't roar, it creeps. You feel a chill in your chest one morning, and by the next you're coughing up blood, or your skin turns pale and the warmth never comes back. There's no medicine, not really, just prayers, potions, and old women with opinions. You sit by the fire with a wet cloth and a bowl of broth, and sometimes that's enough. Sometimes it's not. Historically, winter wasn't just cold, it was a season of sickness. The cramped living spaces, the lack of nutrition, the smoke-filled air, and the poor sanitation made illness inevitable. Respiratory infections, influenza-like fevers, pneumonia, and something called winter plague, that might have been several diseases rolled into one. When the air grows still and the world stops moving, the body does too. Your quirky fact for the night. Many medieval people believed that illness came from bad air, especially during winter when homes were shut tight and ventilation was terrible. They'd burn herbs like rosemary or lavender to cleanse the space. You've seen it yourself. Your aunt once ran through the cottage waving a bunch of dried sage like she was exorcising a ghost after your cousin sneezed more than twice in a row. The debate among historians is whether these rituals were purely superstitious, or if they actually had some practical effect. Burning herbs could kill some bacteria. Washing with vinegar might have reduced surface infections. But it was all trial and error. No real understanding of germs, only the belief that sickness was something you could either scare off or pray away. Back at the church, the ceremony is short, too cold for lingering. The ground is too frozen for a proper burial, so the body will be placed in the crypt beneath the church until the thaw. That's what they tell you anyway. You try not to imagine what the crypt smells like after weeks of accumulating the dead. After the service, people linger outside, reluctant to go home just yet. Not because they want to talk, but because there's something comforting about standing in the cold with others who also heard the bell. You're all thinking the same thing. Will I be next? And you don't say it. You just nod to each other, clear your throats, and pretend your fingers aren't numb. You walk home slowly, staring at the snow, avoiding eye contact. It feels heavier today. The air thicker. You swear the sky's darker too, even though it's barely past midday. Your stomach growls, but you ignore it. Hunger feels disrespectful after a funeral. Back at the cottage, your mother is heating water. She always does that after bad news. Like the smell of steam and boiled herbs might chase away whatever spirit came to claim the child. She says it's for washing, but no one actually uses it. It just sits there, fragrant and warm like a ward against the cold. No one talks much that afternoon. You mend a hole in your sock. Your father sharpens a knife that doesn't need sharpening. The baby chews on a piece of cloth, drooling into it like that's an act of defiance. The silence is different now, thicker, heavier. Death clings to places. You can feel it in the corners of the room, like a draft that won't go away. That night you sleep badly. Every cough in the dark sets your nerves on edge. Every rustle sounds like someone sitting up in bed to say, "I don't feel right." You wake up sweating, then freezing, then sweating again. Your dreams are strange. Long halls, locked doors, voices whispering behind them. You're not sick, not yet, but you feel like sickness is watching, waiting for a weakness. And so the bells ring, and the days go on. You lose track of how many times you've heard them this winter. Once for the miller, twice for old Gertrude, now the baker's boy. It's becoming routine, and that's the worst part. Not that people die, but that you start getting used to it. Still, you get up. You tend the fire, you eat your turnip stew, you check on the animals. You try not to think too hard about the shadows under your brother's eyes, or the way your own lungs feel heavy when you lie down. You pretend everything is normal because that's what keeps you going. Until the next bell. It's the third day after the bell last rang when he shows up, bundled in a heavy fur cloak and riding a horse that looks equally miserable to be outside. You hear the hooves before you see him, slow, deliberate clops down the icy village path, echoing through the air like something important is happening. And it is, because no one rides a horse in winter unless they're mad, desperate, or paid to do it. And this man is all three, the tithe collector. You spot him from the corner of the cottage window and your stomach drops faster than a bucket down a dry well. Everyone stops what they're doing. No one says anything, but the mood changes instantly. Your mother lowers her spoon, your brother's smile fades. Even the goat looks personally offended. The collector has that effect on people. He's not flashy, just layered in too much fur and wearing that expression of eternal disapproval. He carries a satchel full of documents, and you already know your family's name is in there somewhere. His boots crunch through the snow like he's punishing the earth itself. A few villagers poke their heads out of doors, then immediately duck back inside. No one wants to make eye contact. That would be a mistake. The reeve walks out to meet him, doing that awkward half bow that suggests respect, but also a very deep and painful desire to never have this conversation again. You can't hear what they're saying, but the collector points down the path, your path, and the reeve doesn't even argue. He just nods, looks vaguely apologetic, and steps aside. You brace yourself. When he knocks, it's with the back of his gloved hand. You open the door just enough to show your face and some very humble, very non-luxurious background scenery. Cold air rushes in like it's trying to join the meeting. He doesn't waste time with greetings. "I've come to collect." Of course he has. You let him in because not letting him in is worse. He stomps snow off his boots, sniffs once like your home personally offends him, and immediately surveys the room like he's assessing inventory. You've done your best to make the place look poor but dignified. A fire burning just enough to say, "We're not dead," but not enough to say, "We're thriving." No visible meat, no shiny objects. One crying child in the corner for emotional effect. Classic strategy. He opens his satchel and removes a worn scroll, unrolling it slowly like he's reading aloud the terms of your doom. Your father steps forward with his best reasonable peasant face. The one that says, "We are good, simple people, just trying to survive, but also, we will absolutely riot if pushed too far." The tithe this time is grain, 1/10 of the remaining store calculated down to the sheaf. You knew it was coming, but you were hoping, naively, that maybe this year they'd wait until the snow melted, or someone invented mercy. No such luck. You don't argue. No one does. It's not a question of fairness. It's the law. The church demands it, the reeve enforces it, and the collector embodies it. You could try to negotiate, but it's like bargaining with a rock slide, so instead, you nod. You offer him a cup of the weakest beer in the house. He refuses. Of course he does. The grain gets measured carefully with everyone watching. You feel every handful disappear from the store like a punch to the gut. That grain was meant to last until spring. Now it won't. You try not to let your face show anything, especially not rage. Historically, tithes weren't just burdensome, they were constant. 1/10 of everything you produced. Crops, animals, honey, even fish if you happened to live near a river. The idea was that the church took care of your soul, and you took care of the church. Simple in theory, brutal in practice. Your quirky fact for tonight? In some places, you could pay your tithe in beeswax. That's right. Candles were valuable enough to be an acceptable form of tribute. Light was expensive, and the church needed a lot of it. So if you were a beekeeper, congratulations. You were a prime target for collectors who wanted to get paid in wax instead of barley. Lucky you. There's some scholarly debate over how oppressive the tithe system really was. Some historians argue that it was more symbolic than punitive, a kind of religious tax that villagers accepted as part of life. Others point out that during times of famine or hardship, It could literally mean the difference between life and death. It all depended on how rigidly it was enforced, and unfortunately for you, this collector is about as flexible as frozen bread. Once the grain is packed and marked down, he leaves without a thank you, not even a nod. Just turns on his heel and walks back toward his horse, the bag slung over his shoulder like a sack of stolen hope. The reeve gives you a look that might be sympathy or indigestion, hard to say. You shut the door and exhale. Your mother immediately goes to the grain sack and stares inside like she's trying to will it to refill itself. You do the math silently. How long it will last now. How many meals you'll have to skip. It's not good. You don't say it out loud. Instead you turn to the fire and begin peeling potatoes, because that's what there is, and that's what you do. Later that night, someone in the village jokes about the tithe collector being followed by wolves next time, or falling through the ice on the way back. Everyone laughs, a little too hard. It's not a joke so much as a wish, but no one says it plainly. You don't tempt fate, or church law. You go to bed feeling lighter, in the worst way, like something's been taken from you that you'll never get back, because it has, and it'll happen again next year, and the year after that, until spring stops coming, or you do. The sickness starts with coughing. Not loud or dramatic, just a quiet little rasp in the corner of the room, coming from your sister's straw bed near the wall. At first, no one notices. People cough all the time in winter, is what you do between mouthfuls of cold air. You cough to warm your throat, you cough from the smoke, you cough just to prove you're still breathing. But this cough is different, persistent, wet. You try to ignore it. Everyone does, because noticing it would mean doing something about it, and there's not much you can do. The next day she's flushed and shivering, cheeks bright red, forehead slick with sweat. Your mother presses a cool rag to her skin, muttering prayers under her breath like they're a spell. The fire burns hotter that night, fed with your best kindling, and your grandmother even cracks open the bottle of elderberry cordial she's been hoarding since before last Lent. You pour a thimbleful between your sister's lips and pretend it's medicine. It isn't really. It's just tradition wrapped in sugar and alcohol. You don't call for the healer, not yet. There's only one in the village, and she's not exactly reliable. Her remedies include everything from boiled bark tea to slapping a wet chicken across someone's chest to draw out the fever. But mostly she brings gossip and a heavy dose of dread. Her presence in your home would mark your sister as in danger, and none of you are ready to admit that yet. Instead, you do what every family does. You tend to the sick with quiet desperation. You wring out cloths. You whisper reassurances. You make broth with the last of the marrow bones and hope no one else gets hungry. You sleep less, hover more. You try not to think about how fast these things can turn. By the second night, the room smells like vinegar, smoke, and sweat. You crack the shutter open for air, just a sliver, and the cold hits your face like a slap. It doesn't help. The air is still stale, thick with breath and heat. You watch your sister twitch in her sleep, her face turned toward the wall, her hands clenching the blanket like she's fighting something in her dreams. Maybe she is. The rest of you are quiet. No one dares laugh or speak above a whisper. Every sound feels like an intrusion, like it might tip the balance one way or the other. The fire crackles. Someone stirs. The baby cries once and is quickly hushed. Outside, a crow calls into the stillness and you flinch. Historically, illness was a constant winter companion in medieval villages. The combination of poor diet, close quarters, and freezing temperatures created a perfect storm for infections. There were no antibiotics, no sterile tools, no real understanding of germs. Disease came in with the cold and left with the thaw, if it left at all. Your quirky fact for tonight. In some areas, people believed that illness was caused by demons who lived in the rafters of the home during winter. To drive them out, families would sometimes bang pots and pans together or burn pungent herbs to choke them out. So if you ever wondered why your grandmother randomly tosses rosemary on the fire while muttering in Latin, now you know. She's either seasoning the room or evicting invisible squatters. There's some debate among scholars about what people actually understood about disease. Some say medieval folk had a fairly intuitive grasp of cause and effect. Bad air, spoiled food, cold floors. Others argue that belief in the supernatural overshadowed everything. Either way, when someone got sick, the house changed. The energy shifted. Life slowed down and bent around the bed of the ill. You don't sleep much that night. Every time your eyes close, you're jolted awake by another cough or groan or sudden movement. At one point, you hear your sister whisper something, just a single word. but it doesn't sound like anyone's name. You open your eyes and see her eyes wide in the dark, staring at something above her. You look too, but there's nothing. Just smoke and shadows and maybe, just maybe, the rafters whispering back. In the morning, the fever breaks, or seems to. She's pale, drenched in sweat, breathing heavy but steady. Your mother sighs, long and deep, and sinks to the floor beside the bed. No one speaks. You all just look at her, this tiny, shaking figure who survived another night. For now, you eat in silence that morning, weak broth, stale bread, and a kind of exhausted gratitude. No one says she's better. No one wants to jinx it. You just exist for a little while without catastrophe. That feels like a win. But the fear doesn't leave, because now the room is compromised. Sick air, bad spirits, something heavy that clings to the walls. You hang herbs above the door. You throw ashes over the threshold. You ask your aunt to come smudge the room with smoke and muttered phrases passed down from who knows when. You don't believe in it? Not really, but it's better than doing nothing. And you watch everyone more closely. Is your brother coughing now? Did your father just sneeze? Or was that the cold? Your own throat feels scratchy, but you tell yourself it's the dry air, the smoke, the nerves, anything but sickness. Because sickness doesn't just take one person. It creeps, spreads, turns a home into a hospice. And it doesn't care how many prayers you say, or how many clothes you hang from the rafters. It moves anyway. That night your sister sleeps deeply for the first time in days. Her breathing is even, her hands are still. You tuck the blanket around her and sit by the fire, staring into the flames like they might answer something. The rest of the house is quiet, wrapped in that thin hope that maybe, just maybe, you've seen the worst of it. But you know better than to say that out loud, so you poke the fire, sip your weak beer and wait, just in case. You wake in the dark to the sound of scratching. Not the familiar rustle of mice in the grain sack or the occasional shifting of logs in the fire. No, this is something else. Something slow and deliberate, like fingers dragging along the outside of the wall. You hold your breath, listen harder. The scratching stops, then starts again. A dry ticking sound just beneath the window shutter. You don't move, don't call out, just lie there under your blanket, eyes wide open as the cold presses in, and your imagination starts doing things it absolutely should not be doing. By morning, there's no sign of anything. No footprints in the snow outside the cottage, no marks on the wood. You even check the shutter and run your hand along the edge, as if the wood might whisper back what it heard. Nothing. Just frost and silence and the heavy cloud of winter stillness hanging over everything. But the unease doesn't leave. It lingers like a bad smell. Later that day, your grandmother says something strange. She's sitting near the fire, staring into the flames the way she always does when she's thinking about people who've died. You're picking burrs out of your cloak when she murmurs, half to herself. It's the time of year when spirits wander. You stop what you're doing and look at her. She doesn't look back, and she says, when the veil is thin, when the dead get restless, hungry, cold. Now your grandmother says a lot of weird things. She's half blind, sleeps in short bursts, and believes sneezing 3 times in a row is a sign of impending doom. But this one sticks with you, because the scratching didn't sound like an animal. It sounded like someone who wanted in. You go about your chores that day a little more jumpy than usual. Every creak in the rafters makes you glance up. Every shadow feels heavier. Even the sound of the snow shifting off the roof makes your heart lurch like something's jumped onto it. No one else seems to notice. Or maybe they do and just won't say anything. That's the thing about winter. It breeds silence. You all learn to keep your fears quiet so you don't infect the air with them. And then it happens again. The next night, around the same hour, deep into the quiet when the fire's low and the only sound is breathing, you hear it. Scratch, scratch, like nails on wood. Or maybe something sharper. It moves along the side of the cottage, circling. You sit up in bed, heart pounding, and this time your brother hears it too. You see his eyes glowing faintly in the dark, wide with terror. You whisper, "Did you hear that?" He nods, and then the scratching stops. You don't sleep after that. Not really. You lie down again, but your ears stay sharp and your mind starts to spiral. You think about every story you've ever heard, the ones told around fires in the autumn when the nights first began to stretch. About spirits trapped in snowdrifts, knocking at doors, looking for warmth. About the ghosts of those who died in winter and never got a proper burial. about the souls of the unbaptized, condemned to wander forever between snow and sky, wailing in the wind and clawing at shuttered windows. Quirky fact of the night. In some parts of medieval Europe, people left small offerings outside their homes in winter to appease wandering spirits, scraps of bread, drops of ale, even bits of lard. They believed these offerings would keep the dead from entering, from whispering at the walls, from turning the family's breath cold in their sleep. You've never done that before. But now you wonder if maybe you should. You talk to your mother the next day, mention the scratching. She brushes it off. Rats, maybe. Or the wind. But there's a flicker in her eyes, like she knows something and doesn't want to say it. That evening you notice she hangs rosemary over the doorframe, says it's for the smell. But you've lived here your whole life and she's never once cared how the door smells. There's an open debate among scholars about how seriously medieval people took these winter hauntings. Some argue it was metaphor, representing fear, isolation, the psychological toll of being trapped inside for months. Others say no, people genuinely believed the dead were more active in winter, that spirits followed the cold, hiding in the snowdrifts and wind, knocking on doors in the dark to see who was foolish enough to answer. You try not to believe. Really you do. You're rational, or at least as rational as a teenager who shares his bed with a chicken and sleeps 2 feet from a fire pit can be. But that night, you leave a crust of bread just outside the door, not because you believe, just because insurance. And once again the scratching returns, but this time it stops after a few minutes. And when you check in the morning, the crust of bread is gone. Maybe a fox, maybe a stray dog, maybe your uncle drunk again and looking for snacks. You tell yourself all these things, but none of them really sit right. There are no tracks in the snow, just an absence, like something that didn't leave marks. That day the mood shifts. Everyone seems quieter. The air inside the house feels heavier. Your grandmother tells you not to whistle indoors, says it calls the dead. Your brother refuses to go outside after dusk. Even your father, who thinks all of this is nonsense, sharpens the door bolt and makes sure the latch is tight before he goes to sleep. No one says the word ghost, but it's hanging in the air like mist. You begin to notice other things too. Cold spots in the room, the fire burning a little lower, even when you're sure you've added enough wood. Shadows that seem to move just a second too late when the candle flickers. You don't talk about any of it, because if you say it, it's real. Instead, you keep leaving little bits of food at the threshold. A bean, a crust, a drop of soup, and the scratching stops. Eventually. Historically, midwinter was full of superstition. With long nights and little light, people naturally turned inward, not just into their homes, but into their minds. They saw things, felt things, named things. Spirits, demons, witches, ghosts. The line between real and imagined got blurred when the world itself seemed to sleep. That night, the wind picks up. It howls low and long, dragging across the snow like it's searching. You listen from your bed, blanketed in fur and fear, and wonder if anyone else hears the whisper just beneath it. Like a voice, like a plea. You don't answer, and in the morning the bread is gone again. You can feel it slipping away, one log at a time, one snapped twig, one handful of damp kindling sacrificed to the hearth. The firewood pile is shrinking visibly, like it's melting in reverse. You try not to panic, but it's impossible not to notice how fast it's disappearing. You do the math every day. You lie awake at night counting logs in your head. You know exactly how many fires you can build before the stack becomes a memory. And then what? Firewood is currency now, worth more than silver, more than salt, more than anything you have stashed in that creaky little chest under the bed. It keeps you alive. Without it, there's no warmth, no cooked food, no light, no safety. The fire keeps out sickness, the wolves, the scratching, and whatever other horrors winter keeps tucked beneath its white skirts. The fire is your one solid defence, and it's running low, so you go out to collect more. Of course you do. You wrap up in every layer you own, 2 cloaks, 3 scarves, socks under mittens, and head into the woods with a blunt axe and the last of your optimism. Your brother comes with you, dragging the sled behind. The snow is deep now, nearly to your knees, and the cold seeps into your boots with every step. The trees creak overhead, not in a poetic nature is so beautiful way. More like they're warning you, go home. You don't. The deadfall is harder to find these days. Everyone's been scavenging. What used to be a thick border of brush and logs is now picked over, bare and brittle. You walk deeper. Too deep, probably. Far enough that the village disappears behind a screen of frost-covered branches, and there's nothing around you but snow, trees, and that ever-present sound of silence. You don't talk much. Talking wastes energy. Instead, you grunt, nod, and gesture. You find a few branches, a half-rotted stump, a log that looks dry enough to bother with. You hack away at it, your hands stiff and clumsy. Every swing of the axe feels like you're trading strength for heat you won't feel until tonight. Eventually the sled fills halfway. Not great, not terrible. You load on one last limb, then pause to catch your breath. Your brother is staring off into the trees, brow furrowed. "What?" you ask. He shrugs. "Thought I saw something move." You both go quiet. You scan the tree line. Nothing. But you don't laugh it off. Not anymore. Not this deep into winter. Not when you've been hearing scratching at night and the dogs bark at empty corners. You tighten your cloak and keep your knife within reach just in case. It takes twice as long to drag the sled back. The snow grabs your boots like it wants to keep you. Your hands burn from the cold, then go numb, which is worse. The trees seem to close in a little on the way home, as if they're reluctant to let you go. You don't speak again until you see the first roof of the village, covered in soot-stained snow, and your muscles finally unclench. Back at home, your mother looks at the sled and says, "That's all?" You don't answer. You just stomp the snow off your boots and head for the fire. Your brother empties the sled without a word. Firewood is rationed now. You've set strict rules. 1 armful per day, 1 log at a time, only when the cold becomes unbearable. No more letting it burn all night. You wake up at dawn and light it fresh each day like a ritual. Like offering. You keep the ashes too. Use them to clean, insulate the floor, dust the latrine. Nothing goes to waste. Your quirky fact of the night? In some medieval villages, ash was used in making soap. If you had fat left over, and that's a big if, you could combine it with lye from hardwood ashes and water to create a rough, often caustic cleaning substance. It worked. Mostly. Assuming you didn't burn your skin off in the process. Medieval cleanliness, 1 part desperation, 2 parts experimentation. But firewood wasn't just about staying warm, it was about survival math. And here's the historical catch. Not all peasants had access to forests. In many places, trees were property, belonging to the lord, the church, or the crown. Cutting wood without permission was technically theft, punishable theft. Even gathering fallen branches could be illegal, depending on local law. So not only did you have to freeze, you had to freeze politely. Historians still argue about how harsh these rules really were. Some claim local lords turned a blind eye in winter, understanding that frozen peasants were less useful than warm, obedient ones. Others point to harsh penalties handed down for stealing wood. Floggings, fines, even the occasional branding. Depends on where you lived and how well your family was liked. You're not taking chances. Your family's lucky, sort of. You live close enough to the edge of the woods that you can sneak in before sunrise and haul out what you need without attracting much attention. But the woods are running dry. The other families know it too. Tensions are rising. You hear arguments in the village square over who cut what, who took whose pile, who left stumps too close to someone's property line. A man punched his neighbour yesterday over a stack of bark and twigs. Bark and twigs. This is where you are now. The cold continues. Inside your home, you sit close to the hearth and watch the flames dance over your hard-won sticks. You don't get warm exactly, but the fire makes you less cold, which is the best you can hope for. Your hands thaw just enough to hurt. You pull them back and wrap them in your cloak. No one speaks. You think about what happens when the wood runs out, what you'll burn next. Furniture? Already gone? Straw bedding? Maybe. You've heard of people burning dry dung. That's coming soon, probably. Or peat, if you can dig it from under the frozen ground. You wonder what snow would burn like if it could. You wonder if anyone's ever tried. That night you sleep close to the fire again. Too close. Your blanket starts to smoulder at the edge, and your brother wakes you with a shout. You stamp it out and spend the rest of the night shivering. No one yells, no one blames. It's just winter. It takes what it wants, even when you offer it everything. And still, the woodpile gets smaller. Somehow, in the middle of this long, frozen crawl through winter, someone decides it's a good time to get married. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. A wedding? Now? When the river's frozen solid, the pigs are coughing louder than your uncle, and half the village is living on mashed turnips and hope. Bold choice. Or possibly a deeply delusional one. Either way, it's happening. It's Edith, the blacksmith's daughter, and Tomlin, the cooper's apprentice, the one with the unusually large ears and the permanent look of mild confusion. No one saw it coming, not really. They'd barely spoken all summer, but now, in the dead of January, they're suddenly betrothed and planning to tie the knot next week. You suppose desperation does strange things to people. Maybe this is love. Maybe it's about combining firewood supplies. Honestly, same difference. The announcement causes a minor stir, mostly because it gives people something to talk about that isn't death, sickness, or how many days of food are left. A wedding means bread. A wedding means ale. A wedding means, however briefly, pretending things are normal. And normal is a rare luxury these days. Preparations are modest. Extremely modest. There's no money for finery or musicians or elaborate feasts. Edith's dress is dyed wool, probably her mother's old one, let out at the seams and patched at the hem. Tomlin is borrowing boots from the Reeves' son, which means he'll spend the whole ceremony walking like a man in someone else's legs. But no one minds. In fact, there's a quiet joy about the whole thing. Like everyone's just relieved to be reminded that people still fall in love, or at least agree to tolerate each other through multiple winters. You're asked to help gather greenery for the ceremony, sprigs of holly, some evergreen boughs, anything vaguely festive. It feels ridiculous picking through snowdrifts looking for something green in a world of white and grey. But you find a few stubborn patches, mostly half-frozen ivy clinging to stone fences. You return to the cottage with your arms full of frozen optimism and fingers so numb they don't fully bend. The wedding takes place in the chapel, naturally. There's barely room for everyone, but the fire is lit, and the candlelight flickers warmly against the stone walls. The priest mumbles the Latin half from memory, half from habit. You suspect he's as surprised as anyone to be officiating a winter wedding instead of a funeral. Edith smiles. Tomlin does too, nervously, like he's not sure if this is really happening. They exchange vows that sound more like a truce than a declaration of love, but it works. Everyone claps, or at least thumps their hands together through mittens. You catch yourself smiling without meaning to. After the ceremony, there's a gathering at the blacksmith's house. You'd call it a party if the food situation weren't so bleak. Still, people bring what they can. Half a loaf of rye, a crock of pickled beets, one sad chicken that's been boiled within an inch of its life. There's beer too. Not much, but enough to warm the room and loosen a few tongues. Someone plays a tune on a reed pipe. 2 people try to dance. One falls over. Everyone laughs. It's the happiest the village has been in months. You sit near the hearth, sipping warm beer and watching the newlyweds take their seats on the wedding bench. A rickety thing dragged out of storage and decorated with ivy like it's not a glorified stool. They look exhausted and vaguely terrified, but also proud, like they've done something brave. You ask your cousin if he thinks they'll last. He shrugs. If they don't kill each other before spring, maybe. Historically, winter weddings were rare but not unheard of. Most marriages took place after the harvest, when food was plentiful and dowries could be negotiated with slightly less desperation. But when people needed to merge households for survival, or if there was a pregnancy involved, the timing became less about romance and more about logistics. Your quirky fact for tonight. In some parts of medieval Europe, there was a tradition called charivari, where villagers would create a raucous procession for newlyweds, especially mismatched or suspiciously timed ones, banging pots, singing bawdy songs, and sometimes even pelting the couple with old vegetables. Think of it as community hazing with a side of passive aggression. Thankfully, your village skips that part tonight, probably because no one wants to waste a turnip. There's still debate among historians about how much say young couples actually had in their marriages. Some sources suggest that love matches weren't as rare as people think, that plenty of peasants married for affection, not just economics. Others argue that families, dowries and land arrangements played a much larger role, especially in small communities where everyone knew each other's business. In Edith and Tomlin's case, it's likely a mix of both, or maybe just the desire not to face February alone. After the beer runs out, people begin to drift home. The snow outside is falling gently now, thick, slow flakes that catch in your hood and stick to your eyelashes. You walk quietly, tired, but oddly uplifted. A wedding doesn't change anything, not really. The food stores are still low, the wolves are still out there, the firewood's still vanishing, but something in the air feels lighter, if only for a moment. Back at your cottage, the hearth has burned low and everyone is asleep. You hang your cloak, stir the embers and crawl into bed, still half smiling at the absurdity of it all. Getting married in January, in this cold, with this chaos. You pull the blanket over your head and think, better them than me. Then you pause. Maybe someday it will be you. Maybe you'll find someone worth sharing the stew with. Someone who makes you laugh even when your toes are frozen and your nose is running and you're living on boiled oats and beer. Maybe winter isn't just something to survive. Maybe, just maybe, it's something to live through with someone. You snort into the blanket. Or maybe that's just indigestion from the pickled beets. Either way, you sleep well. The river freezes in late January. Not just a skin of ice along the edges like earlier in the season, but a full, solid sheet stretching from bank to bank. You walk out to see it one morning, boots crunching over frost-bitten grass and last autumn's forgotten leaves now preserved in snow like pressed flowers. The surface of the river glistens under a pale sun, a wide silver ribbon so still it seems like the world forgot to move. You test it, of course. Everyone does. You take a cautious step out and the ice groans softly beneath you. Just enough sound to remind you that this is nature's tightrope. You walk it at your own risk. Your brother runs past you, sliding on his boots and laughing like he's not 90% scarf and 10% recklessness. The village children follow, shrieking, throwing handfuls of powdery snow into the air, each daring the others to slide farther. It's both beautiful and completely nerve-wracking. Soon it becomes a daily thing. People start crossing the river on foot, using the ice as a shortcut instead of slogging around it through frozen marsh and wooded trails. The old bridge is nearly buried in snow anyway, so the frozen river feels like a gift. For now. By the week's end, someone's set up a stall on the ice, a wooden cart with a cloth awning and a hand-painted sign offering hot broth and boiled eggs. You can't afford the eggs, but the broth is warm and salty and worth every crumb of bread you trade for it. The ice becomes a temporary village square. You've seen this before, but it always feels slightly surreal. It's like the season has flipped the world upside down, made the impossible normal. A travelling tinker even appears one morning, dragging his sled across the frozen surface like a slow-moving miracle. He sells needles, ribbons, a tiny tin whistle your sister begs for until your mother gives in. He says he's headed south as soon as the roads thaw, which, given the state of things, sounds like he'll be living here permanently. Someone decides to hold a race. Boys and girls, teenagers mostly, sliding across the ice in their socks, shouting, flailing, crashing into each other. You watch from the bank with your arms crossed, trying not to smile. Your cousin wipes out spectacularly and loses a mitten. It's gone in seconds, swallowed by the snow and laughter. The whole thing feels festive. For the first time in weeks, people look up, talk, laugh. You see neighbours you haven't glimpsed since before the solstice. They bring flasks of weak cider and stories that feel warmer than any blanket. The old men sit on crates near the edge, telling tales of the year the river froze so thick they danced on it under moonlight. You don't believe that part, but it's a good story. Historically, frozen rivers weren't just an inconvenience. They were opportunities. In cities, especially along major waterways like the Thames, frozen stretches turned into literal frost fairs, with vendors, games, and even temporary inns set up right on the ice. In villages, it was simpler, but no less remarkable. A frozen river meant easier trade, faster travel, and, crucially, a place for people to gather in the bleakest stretch of winter. Your quirky fact for the night. In 1536, a man in London roasted an entire pig on the frozen Thames, on a spit, with spectators. The ice was that thick. Now your village is a bit less theatrical, but someone did bring out a fiddle and tried to play, though the cold warped the strings so badly it sounded like an angry cat with rhythm. Of course, there's debate among scholars about just how safe these activities were, or how frequent. Some claim that people treated frozen rivers like highways, using them regularly and efficiently. Others argue they were a last resort, used only during the worst winters when other routes were impossible. What's clear, though, is that when the ice came, it created an entirely new kind of community, one balanced on top of a slippery, cracking floor. You're not foolish, though. You keep your ears open for that sound, the one that's like a sigh or a moan coming from beneath the ice. When you hear it, your stomach tightens. It means the river's still alive down there, still moving under the shell, still waiting for a wrong step. And sure enough, someone makes that wrong step. It happens just after midday during a game of chase. A boy, Jacob, the baker's nephew, runs too close to the centre. There's a sharp crack, a shout, and then the ice swallows him like a beast. It happens fast. 1 second he's there, the next there's a hole and everyone's screaming. He's pulled out somehow by 2 older boys who lie flat on the ice and haul him free with a rope and blind luck. He's coughing, sputtering, blue as sky, and wrapped in cloaks before anyone can think. They take him home, half frozen and shaken, and the ice is left quiet again, broken only by the wind and a jagged wound that keeps spreading slowly outward. After that, the river is off limits. The reeve says so, the priest says so, and most importantly, your mother says so. She bans you from even looking at it. The ice gives, she says, just like people. Looks strong, breaks when you need it most. Still, you can't help but sneak a glance each morning. It's like checking on an old friend who betrayed you. You want to forgive it, but the trust is broken. Over the next few days, the stalls disappear. The makeshift broth vendor goes home. The tinker leaves, dragging his sled with a bit more urgency. The laughter dies down. The ice creaks louder now, especially when the wind blows. It's turning dangerous again, no longer novelty but threat. You sit near the fire that night thinking about how quickly things shift. One day the river is a fairground, the next it's a grave in waiting. Winter doesn't let you get comfortable. The moment you do, it pulls the ground out from under your feet, sometimes literally. But for a few days at least you had joy, real joy. Feet slipping, hands clasped, cheeks pink from something other than windburn. A brief thaw in the soul, even if the world stayed frozen. You wrap yourself in your blanket and close your eyes, the sound of cracking ice echoing in your mind. There's always that person in the village, the one who doesn't quite understand danger, or chooses not to, or simply lives on a different wavelength than the rest of humanity. In your case, that person is Willem, mid-30s, bearded, missing 2 fingers, constantly grinning like he's in on a joke that no one else finds funny. Willem is, for lack of a better term, the village idiot. Not in a cruel sense, just descriptive. He's a bit touched, as your grandmother would say, always has been, but harmless, in theory, until the day he decides to go racing across the half-melted river like it's a summer meadow. You hear about it from your cousin, who bursts into the cottage just before dusk, eyes wide, cheeks red from both cold and scandal. Willem's out on the river, he gasps, on skates. Which is not a word you hear often. Skates. Who owns skates? This is not Holland. This is your village. People wear boots stuffed with straw and hope. Apparently Willem fashioned his own out of old bone and leather straps, which is either brilliant or psychotic, likely both. He strapped them on this morning, walked out to the river, ignored the gaping crack where Jacob fell through last week and decided to go for a sprint. You throw on your cloak and head out because of course you do. The entire village is gathering along the bank like it's market day. Word travels faster when someone's being stupid in public. You join the crowd and peer out across the ice, and sure enough, there he is, Willem, skating, poorly. He's wobbling like a goat on stilts, arms flailing, scarf trailing behind him like a flag of impending disaster. He's grinning wildly, cheeks pink, shouting something incomprehensible every few seconds. It might be "I'm a bird" or "the wind is my wife." No one knows, no one wants to know. The villagers are split. Half of them are shouting at him to come back. The other half are just watching, mouths slightly open, caught between awe and horror. Your uncle is taking bets on how far he'll get before plunging into the icy depths. Someone offers 3 coppers on mid-river. You're standing next to your mother, who is muttering a furious string of prayers, curses and preventative spells. "That man's going to die," she says, and then haunt us for being too polite to stop him. To be fair, Willem isn't the only one who's gone a bit strange lately. Everyone's showing signs. Winter does that. You see things out of the corner of your eye that aren't there. You start whispering to your soup. Your aunt spent an entire afternoon sewing buttons onto a sock, in case it wants to be a glove someday. No one questions it. The cold wears on the mind. And Willem's mind, already hanging by a thread, has clearly snapped it and used it to lace up a pair of bone skates. He picks up speed, or something vaguely resembling speed, and glides downriver, arms outstretched like he thinks he's flying. He hits a rough patch of snow and nearly topples, then recovers with a triumphant yell that sounds like "Winter loves me." You're not so sure. Then comes the inevitable. He makes it halfway across before the ice groans beneath him. Loudly. Everyone goes silent. It's like the whole village inhales at once. You watch as he slows, looks down, and then, because he's Willem, jumps. You scream. The villagers scream, and the ice, miraculously, does not break. He lands, stumbles, and somehow keeps skating, now laughing so hard he nearly falls over anyway. A maniacal whoop echoes across the trees. Someone claps, someone else faints. You want to throw a snowball at his head. Eventually he makes it back to the bank, flushed and triumphant, skates caked in snow, beard rhymed with frost. The river is strong today, he announces, arms wide like a preacher. She sings beneath my feet. Your grandmother standing behind you mutters, she'll sing louder when she drags you under. Historically, bone skates were real. People in northern Europe used sharpened animal bones strapped to their boots to glide across frozen rivers and lakes as early as the 9th century. It wasn't exactly figure skating, but it worked, especially for messengers, hunters, or apparently madmen with nothing left to lose. In some places, entire communities learned to skate before they could walk straight. Your village is not one of those places. Your quirky fact for the night. In medieval Finland, children learned to skate on frozen lakes using poles and bone skates, propelling themselves along like awkward Viking gondoliers. It was both transportation and sport, a practical skill that occasionally saved lives, or ended them if you weren't paying attention to cracks in the ice. There's scholarly debate about how widespread this practice was. Some say it was localized to colder, flatter regions with predictable winters. Others argue it was more common than we realize, lost to time because no one thought to record idiots skating on dangerous ice as significant historical data. You're inclined to agree with the latter, given the scene you just witnessed. After Willem's performance, the villagers slowly disperse, some shaking their heads, others oddly inspired. He's touched, someone says, but he's free. You're not sure what that means. Maybe it means you have to be half mad to survive this season. Maybe it means you're the one who's crazy for watching and not joining. Back at home, your father tells the story like it's a legend already. Adds details that definitely didn't happen. Says Willem did a backflip. Says the ice sparkled like glass. Says he saw the Virgin Mary in the sky over the river. You're too tired to argue. Let them have their myths. That night you lie in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering what kind of person decides to dance on death like that. Maybe someone who's lost enough to be brave. Maybe someone who understands that fear only gets you so far before it becomes another kind of cage. Maybe, come spring, you'll try skating. Just closer to shore, you head to the monastery because you're out of options. Or maybe just out of patience. It's not far from the village, perched up on the hill like some kind of judgmental owl made of stone. You see it nearly every day, its little bell tower poking out above the trees, its roof covered in frost like powdered sugar. It always looks serene from a distance. Clean, still, peaceful in the way that makes you wonder what they know that you don't. Plus, you hear they have better food. That part is absolutely true. The monks grow their own vegetables in a walled garden that somehow still produces things this time of year. Cabbage mostly, and those pale winter carrots that look like they died of embarrassment. They also have beeswax candles, actual flour, and a cow named Mildred that apparently gives milk out of pure habit and spite. You've had dreams about that cow. Your mother sends you with a small offering. A jar of pickled onions, 2 folded linen napkins, and a badly spelled note asking politely if the monks could spare a loaf of bread or a bit of cheese. She says to smile and use your Sunday manners, which basically means don't tell any jokes about the Virgin Mary, and don't chew on anything while you're talking. The path to the monastery winds up through frozen woods, steep and slick with half-thawed snow. You slip twice. The second time, you land on your elbow and curse loud enough to scare a squirrel out of a tree. When you reach the gates, your face is red, your knees are wet, and your Sunday manners are hanging on by a thread. A monk greets you. You think his name is Brother Alder, but you've only ever heard him called the tall one with the weird feet. He smiles, gives you a long look, and lets you in without a word. Inside, it's like entering another world. Quiet, warm, orderly. The courtyard is swept. The stones are neatly stacked. There are no animal smells. No one's shouting. No one's coughing up something worrying into a pot. You can hear your own footsteps. Brother Alder leads you to the kitchen, where another monk is kneading bread with hands like loaves themselves. A third is stirring a pot of something that smells like actual soup, with herbs in it. You feel a little light-headed. One of them offers you a mug of warm cider. You nod so hard your neck cracks. They're generous. More generous than you expect. They give you a small loaf, half a wheel of hard cheese, and a small twist of something they call blessing salt. which smells like rosemary and mystery. You thank them with a bow that's almost a curtsy, and promise that your mother says, "God be with you," which she didn't, but probably would have if she'd thought of it. Before you leave, Brother Alder invites you to attend the afternoon prayer service. You don't really want to, but you nod politely, because turning down a monk feels like it might curse your family's stew pot. The chapel is small and dimly lit, but warm. The benches are plain. The air smells like wax and pine resin. The monks file in silently, kneel, bow, and begin to chant. Low, humming voices rise and fall, blending into something that isn't quite music, but isn't quite not music either. You don't understand the words. They're in Latin or maybe just very tired English. But the sound is soothing, comforting. It's the kind of noise that makes your heartbeat slow down. You close your eyes and drift somewhere between sleep and memory. Historically, monasteries in medieval Europe weren't just religious centres, they were lifelines. They kept medicinal gardens, preserved ancient texts, provided charity to the poor, and maintained some of the only stable food sources during harsh winters. Monks were often the best educated men in the region, and the only ones with enough free time to experiment with things like beer recipes or herbal poultices for mysterious rashes. Your quirky fact for tonight: many monks wore wool undergarments in the winter, but deliberately slept without them to embrace the discomfort and purify themselves through suffering. Some even slept on cold stone floors or fasted for days, not because they had to, but because they believed spiritual clarity came bundled with frostbite. Your personal opinion: spiritual clarity can wait until after spring. Scholars often debate the role monasteries played in rural communities. Were they sanctuaries, institutions of control, sources of genuine charity, or just well-fed landlords in robes? The answer, as usual, is yes, all of the above. Monks could be compassionate healers, strict enforcers, or grumpy middlemen with surprisingly sharp elbows at the bread table. It depended on the abbey. Yours seems to fall on the gentler side, though you suspect the head monk could win a fistfight if pushed. After the service, Brother Alder walks you back down the hill. He doesn't say much, but he asks how your family is faring. You tell him the truth, more or less, that you're managing, that no one's sick right now, that the firewood is going fast and the stew's getting thin. He nods slowly, like he hears that kind of thing a lot. Maybe too much. At the village edge, he pauses. The cold tests everything, he says. Your faith, your patience, your neighbours. Then he smiles gently. Don't fail the test just because it's hard. You're not entirely sure what that means, but it sounds monk-like, so you nod. He turns and walks back toward the monastery, his steps leaving a clean trail in the snow. When you get home, your mother inspects the cheese like it's a holy relic. Your father gives the bread a reverent sniff. The blessing salt goes directly into the stew pot, and everyone leans a little closer to inhale the suddenly upgraded aroma. That night, you eat slowly, chewing each bite like you're memorizing it. It tastes real, like food from before the snow, like something that might actually carry you through to spring. Later, lying in bed, you think about the monks, wrapped in their robes, waking up in cold stone rooms to sing into the quiet. You wonder if they ever feel afraid, or if their prayers really work, or if they just know how to wait better than the rest of you. You fall asleep thinking about the chant, the warm cider, and the sudden peace you felt for those few quiet minutes. Maybe faith doesn't melt the snow, but it makes the cold feel a little less personal. You didn't mean to start daydreaming about leaving. It just sort of happened. Maybe it's because the snow's been falling in the exact same way for the last 7 days straight, or maybe it's because you caught yourself staring at the frost on the window like it might melt if you glared hard enough. Either way, the thought creeps in. What if you didn't stay? At first, it's just idle fantasy, harmless. You imagine packing a bag, slipping out early, your boots wrapped in rags, heading somewhere, anywhere. Maybe south, where the winters are gentler and the snow doesn't pile up like it's trying to bury you alive. You imagine a town with market stalls and warm bread and stone buildings that don't creak every time the wind sighs. You imagine a fire that burns without rationing, a bed without straw, soup with more than one vegetable in it. You don't tell anyone about these thoughts, of course. They'd laugh, or worse, they'd take it seriously and think you're losing your grip. Everyone fantasizes during winter. It's a shared illusion, part of survival. Some dream of feasts, others dream of fields. You apparently dream of escape. The turning point is small, as it always is. One morning you find yourself staring out over the ridge near the pasture, gazing down at the old trade road buried beneath feet of snow. You squint and swear you see tracks, faint grooves disappearing into the woods, cart tracks maybe, or a traveller passing through, someone going somewhere. You start asking questions, casually, to your cousin, your uncle, anyone who might not think twice. What's south of here? How far to the next village? Does anyone trade in the winter? What's the road like after the thaw? No one gives you a straight answer, just shrugs, grunts, a couple of vague directions involving dead trees and rocks shaped like pigs. Your grandmother overhears and gives you a look that freezes your blood more than the wind ever could. Don't go looking for life where the ground hasn't warmed yet, she says. Nothing grows from frozen footsteps. You pretend not to understand. She pretends not to know what you're thinking. Historically, peasants didn't travel much. You stayed where you were born, worked the same land your parents worked, and died under the same roof you were likely born beneath. But there were exceptions. Seasonal labourers, pilgrims, peddlers, the occasional runaway. Freedom was rare, but not impossible. And in a season like this, when the air seems full of waiting, even impossible things start to feel plausible. Your quirky fact for tonight. There were documented cases of peasants simply walking away, packing a bundle, leaving in the night, and trying their luck elsewhere. Some joined monasteries. Others vanished into forests and re-emerged as bandits. A few made it to cities where they changed their names and tried to pass as something other than what they were. It didn't always work, but when the snow has pinned you in place for too long, even a bad idea feels like a lifeline. The scholars debate how realistic these escapes were. Some argue that strict feudal laws made movement nearly impossible without permission from your lord. Others say enforcement was inconsistent, and that people found ways to vanish into the landscape, especially during chaotic times, plagues, famines, wars, times not unlike now. You don't pack a bag, not yet, but you start taking longer walks. You make excuses to check the traps near the tree line. You collect firewood farther than you need to. You memorize landmarks, a crooked birch, a fallen log shaped like a curled hand. You feel the pull of the road like a thread stitched into your ribs, tugging gently, insistently, and yet you never quite step past the invisible border. The point where the familiar gives way to the unknown. You reach it, stare past it, feel your foot hover over the threshold, and then turn back. Every time. Not because you're scared. Or maybe because you're scared, but not of what's out there. You're scared of leaving behind what little you do know. The fire, the stew, your sister's snoring, your father's bad jokes, the goat that thinks it's a dog. What if you leave and things get better the next day? What if you miss the thaw by one sunrise? The village doesn't notice your restlessness, or if it does, it pretends not to. That's how winter works. Everyone agrees not to look too closely at each other's breaking points. You all pretend to be fine, like your mind isn't crawling the walls, while your body sits motionless by the fire. One afternoon, while trimming the hooves of a miserable pig, you ask your brother if he's ever thought about leaving. He blinks at you like you've grown antlers. Leave and go where? You shrug. South or west, maybe the sea. He laughs, actually laughs. And do what? Sell snow to someone who already hates winter? You grin, but it fades quickly. He doesn't get it. Or maybe he does, but he's better at ignoring it. That night, you dream of walking, not running, walking, slow, steady, through snow that gradually melts with every step, revealing green beneath. In the dream, you don't know where you're going, but you're warm, light, unburdened. Then you wake up and your breath fogs in the air and your blanket has slipped off and your feet are cold again. You sigh, roll over and pull the blanket tighter. You're still here, for now. You hear it in the pantry first. Tiny, rhythmic rustling. A sound that wouldn't matter in summer, when there's plenty of noise and food to spare. But now, in this pin-drop quiet season of rationed meals and careful counting, it might as well be a war drum. You freeze mid-step, spoon still in hand, and listen. There it is again, skitter-scratch, chew. You set the spoon down, very carefully. You open the pantry door and there it is. A mouse, bold as sin, sitting in the sack of oats like it pays rent. It stares at you, whiskers twitching, then scurries away into the shadows with all the grace of a smug little criminal. You don't scream, but it's close. You sigh instead, and for some reason that feels worse. Your mother takes the news as if you've reported a murder. She storms in, apron flapping, broom in hand, launching into a full-scale inspection of the pantry with the grim efficiency of someone who's dealt with this before. She finds droppings, chewed corners, a half-eaten apple that might have been the last one not wrinkled into oblivion. She swears under her breath, which means it's serious. The mice are in. Again. This happens every winter, of course, you know that. They come in with the cold, sniffing out anything edible, squeezing through holes the width of a coin. But it never fails to feel like a betrayal. You worked so hard to save what little you had, carefully layering straw, sealing sacks with cloth, hanging cheeses high and tucking dried beans in jars. You thought you were safe, but you weren't. You never are. That night your father sets traps. Simple ones, bent branches, bits of meat, a small flat stone that's seen more executions than dinner plates. Your brother tries to improve one using a carved spring mechanism and nearly takes off a finger. You post watch over the pantry for half an hour before giving up, your eyes dry from staring into darkness and your ears ringing with phantom squeaks. In the morning you check the traps. One is sprung, one is empty. One has a very dead, very small mouse beneath it. You bury it in the snow out back like a tiny funeral you don't want to talk about. Still, the damage is done. A good portion of the oats are spoiled. Some were meant for soup, others for the mule. You've just lost a week's worth of meals and the mice don't care. You imagine them somewhere nearby, full-bellied, giggling in mouse language about how soft your cheese was and how poorly you tied your sacks. You grit your teeth and check every corner of the house again. Historically, rodents were a constant, exhausting enemy in medieval homes, especially in winter. The lack of sanitation, combined with warm straw floors and abundant hiding spots, created a perfect mouse utopia. And the food stores, that was a mouse banquet. It wasn't just about the food they ate, it was what they ruined. One hole in a sack of grain, and mould could take the whole thing. One chewed edge on a wheel of cheese, and suddenly no one wanted to touch it, even if they were starving. Your quirky fact for the night. In some medieval communities, people held actual trials for animals. Yes, trials. Mice, rats, pigs, even insects were brought before ecclesiastical courts, accused of theft or destruction, and sometimes sentenced to exile or death. There are written records of rats being warned to leave the premises or face divine punishment. How they were expected to read the notice is unclear. Scholars debate how literal these trials were. Some think it was symbolic, more of a ritual, a public way of acknowledging the helplessness of the people and pleading for divine assistance. Others argue it was deadly serious. In an age where every scrap of food mattered, seeing your stores destroyed by vermin wasn't just unfortunate, it was a crisis, and desperate people make weird legal choices. Back in your home, the mice become a full-time obsession. Every scuffle in the wall sends a chill down your spine. Every squeak feels personal. You sleep lighter, dreaming of tiny feet creeping over your face, of oats vanishing before your eyes. Your mother starts sprinkling dried mint near the sacks. Your grandmother swears by burning rosemary ash. Your sister carves a small wooden cat and puts it in the pantry, like some kind of decoy guardian. It doesn't work, but you keep it anyway. You also try a cat. Briefly. A mangy thing your cousin finds in the barn. More bones than fur, eyes like dying coals. You bring it home, feed it scraps, and wait for it to do its job. It ignores the mice entirely, spends most of its time curled in the warmest corner of the house, snoring and refusing to move unless food is involved. You begin to suspect it's in league with the mice. Maybe they have a deal. Eventually you adapt. You store food differently. You sleep with one ear open. You wrap cheese in double layers of cloth and hang it higher than before. And grudgingly, you let the mice take what they will. A little, not everything. You begin to think of it as a tax. They steal from you the way the tithe collector does, just enough to remind you who's in charge. Some days, you almost respect them. Their audacity, their resilience, how they carve tunnels in the walls, raise families in the rafters, thrive in a place where even humans are struggling to get by. You imagine them as a tiny mirror version of your village, arguing over scraps, complaining about the cold, and wondering how long this winter's going to last. But then they eat your last apple, and you throw a boot at the wall. The boot leaves a dent. The mice remain unfazed. Winter marches on. You've forgotten what real celebration feels like, what it means to look forward to something rather than just surviving it. But then, one morning, Someone says the words aloud, almost too casually to be real. Tomorrow's Christmas. You blink. Not because you're surprised by the calendar, your mother's been tracking the days in charcoal slashes above the hearth, but because it doesn't feel like Christmas. Not even a little. It feels like late January and early November and a bad dream all at once. But still. The word hangs in the air like wood smoke. Christmas. The announcement stirs something. People sit up straighter. The usual morning silence at breakfast is broken with small, reluctant questions. Will there be mass? Is there any beer left? Do we have flour? The mood shifts. Only slightly, but enough that you feel it in your bones. A pulse of memory, of better years. Preparations begin the way everything begins in winter. Slowly, carefully, and with low expectations. The cottage is already half decorated with practical greenery. Rosemary over the lintel, dried ivy near the hearth. But your sister scours the woods for a few fresh branches, some berries, and, miraculously, a single sprig of mistletoe that hasn't frozen to dust. She holds it up like a trophy. Your mother tells her to hang it by the window and not get any ideas. There's not much to cook with, but everyone pitches in. Your father pulls out the emergency flour, just enough for one dense, flat cake sweetened with dried fruit soaked in watered-down ale. Your mother adds herbs to the turnip stew and calls it festive. You offer to help and she makes you peel onions, lots of them. You don't complain. It's the most hopeful chore you've had in weeks. The village starts to stir too. Neighbours exchange small things, half a loaf, a candle, a tiny bag of salt. It's all bartered, of course. No one has coin, but there's an energy to it. Like everyone agrees to pause the despair for one day. A truce. A warm flicker of kindness before the cold rolls in again. You head to the chapel for Mass with your brother, walking the familiar path with numb feet and wind-chapped faces. The bell rings weakly in the tower, the clapper half frozen, but still ringing all the same. Inside, the chapel is packed. You haven't seen this many people in one place since the harvest feast, and even then they looked less tired. Now they sit close for warmth more than piety, heads bowed under hoods and scarves, eyes flickering in the candlelight like they're afraid to believe in something too much. Father Oswin's sermon is short. His fingers are visibly shaking, but he speaks of hope, of endurance, of a season that eventually yields to light. He tells the story of the Christ child wrapped in swaddling clothes, born in a stable surrounded by animals. You look around the chapel and realise half the congregation still smells faintly of goat and damp straw. The irony isn't lost on you. Then comes the singing, soft, unsure, but real. Latin words you barely understand, sung with cracked lips and tired voices. You join in, hesitantly at first, then louder. The acoustics in the chapel are forgiving. They make everyone sound better than they are. You close your eyes and sing, and for a minute the cold is gone. Historically, Christmas in medieval villages wasn't the glittering holiday of modern imagination. It was a brief, precious break in the long stretch of winter, a time to feast if possible, to worship, to visit neighbours, and perhaps most importantly to remember that joy was allowed. It wasn't always about presents or pageantry. Sometimes it was just about trying. Your quirky fact for the night? Medieval Christmases often stretched for 12 full days. Yes, the origin of that song, culminating in Twelfth Night, which was usually the most raucous of the bunch. But in poor villages, those days blurred into the same routines. Prayer, eating what little could be spared, and maybe, just maybe, a game or two in the snow if the sun made an appearance. There's scholarly debate about how widespread and elaborate Christmas celebrations were in rural communities. Some historians argue that most peasants barely celebrated at all. Too poor, too cold, too focused on survival. Others say the opposite, that these rare, sanctioned breaks in hardship were sacred, and people found ways to honour them, even if only with shared bread and candlelight. Your village seems to fall somewhere in the middle, determined not to let the day pass unmarked, but too tired to pretend it's anything more than symbolic. After Mass, the villagers gather outside, huddled in groups, exchanging greetings with hands that never leave their cloaks. Someone starts passing around a bottle of something strong and questionably legal. You take a sip when it comes your way. It tastes like fire and regret, but it warms you from the inside out. Someone starts singing a secular tune, a drinking song with questionable rhymes, and your brother joins in, off-key and grinning. For the first time in what feels like a century, people are laughing. Back at home, the feast is laid out. Onion pie, mostly crust, hard cheese, the stew with extra herbs, and that dense little fruitcake, now slightly burned at the edges. You all sit around the fire and eat slowly, savouring each bite like it might be the last thing you ever taste. You pass the beer around, share quiet toasts, and pretend the walls aren't covered in frost. After the meal, you tell stories. Not ghost stories. No one needs those right now. But old tales, the kind with knights and giants and magic swords. Your grandfather tells one about a talking goose who saves a village from starvation. It makes no sense, but everyone listens like it's gospel. You find yourself laughing again. Real laughter. Not nervous, not bitter, just joy. Later, you step outside. The sky's impossibly clear, the stars so bright they look like they might fall down at any moment. You can see your breath in front of you, curling in soft tendrils, and you let it rise into the cold night. Somewhere in the distance you hear a dog bark. Somewhere else a baby cries. But mostly there's just stillness. You stand there a moment longer watching the smoke from your chimney curl up into the stars and think, we made it this far, and that for now is enough. You notice it first on your left big toe. A strange sort of numbness. Not the usual sting of cold, but a deeper sensation, like your skin has turned into something else. You press your thumb against it and feel nothing. Not even the pressure. You peel off your boot, then the rag wrapped around your foot and your stomach drops. The toe is pale, almost white, with the faintest hint of blue creeping around the nail. You sit there staring at it, like you've just seen your body betray you. Your mother confirms it with a grim nod. Frostbite, she says, without much surprise. You've been out too long these days. She doesn't say it unkindly, but it lands hard anyway, because she's right. You've been pushing it, hauling wood farther, checking traps deeper into the forest, stomping down snow paths like you've got somewhere to be, anything to stay busy, anything to keep from sitting still long enough to hear your own thoughts. She goes straight to the remedies. First, she dunks your foot into a basin of snowmelt so cold it makes your spine tighten, like a drawn bow. Then she wraps the toe in a rag soaked in, of all things, goose fat. Warmed slightly, not hot, just enough to feel like maybe this isn't how toes die. You'll keep it, she mutters, more to herself than to you. I think. If you're lucky. You nod like you're fine, but you're not. That toe has carried you through fields, down forest paths, into and out of the chapel. You've kicked stones with it, stepped on slugs with it, danced badly with it at the harvest feast. It's yours. And now it's half dead, sitting there like a pale bean waiting to fall off. By evening, the rest of your foot has started to ache. You've gone from toe pride to full body panic in less than 12 hours. Your grandmother, ever the historian of home remedies, offers up several options. A poultice of mashed onion and salt, a compress made of sour milk and moss, and, her personal favourite, holding your foot over a steaming pot of cabbage until you can feel shame returning to your skin. You try the cabbage. It works. Sort of. You also now associate cabbage with pain. Historically, frostbite was a constant threat in winter. Not that medieval people had the word for it. They called it winter's rot, or the chill wound, and half the time they just ignored it until toes turned black and dropped off. Warmth was rationed. Socks were a luxury. Boots were sometimes shared or passed down from someone who had bigger feet and lower standards. Losing a toe wasn't just painful, it was a risk to your livelihood. You can't plough fields or haul carts if you're limping. Your quirky fact for the night? In the 14th century, some folk healers believed that tying a strip of sheep's wool around a frostbitten limb and reciting the right prayer at midnight could reverse the damage. The catch? The prayer had to be whispered while holding your breath. If you inhaled, you had to start over. You try it, just in case. You can't tell if it works, but you do feel lightheaded and slightly ridiculous afterward. Your father doesn't laugh at the situation, but he does give you a look that says, "This is why we don't wander past the tree line when the wind bites." He's right, of course, but you still resent it. You didn't do anything reckless. Not really. Just stayed out a little too long. Took a few extra minutes hauling kindling. Got distracted watching the way the icicles drip under the sun, even though the sun has no warmth to offer. You were tired of being indoors, of staring at the same walls, hearing the same coughs, feeling the same dread. And now, you're stuck. Quite literally. Foot up, wrapped in layers of cloth, sitting by the fire like a fallen warrior. Your sister draws eyes on your crutch and names it Sir Limp-a-Lot. You don't laugh. but you also don't throw it at her. Small growth. Your mother keeps checking the toe. She presses it with her thumb every few hours and mutters about circulation. You pretend it doesn't freak you out. But every time she frowns slightly and says, "Still cold," you feel a shiver that has nothing to do with the wind. There's no doctor to call, of course. No healer with magic balms, just guesswork and goose fat and hope. You hear stories of people soaking frostbitten hands in warm beer, of shepherds warming their feet in sheep's bellies, of unlucky travellers who return from long walks with only 7 fingers and a new respect for fire. The stories are meant to be cautionary, but they're also comforting. It's happened before. People survived it. Some even walked again. Still, it changes things. You can't do your share of the work. You feel useless, watching your brother haul in wood while you peel apples from a chair, your foot sticking out like a loaf of undercooked bread. You hate it. The stillness, the feeling of being fragile, and more than anything, you're scared. Scared that one day soon, your mother will unwrap the bandage, press her thumb to the skin, and feel nothing. Scared that she'll meet your eyes and you'll both understand silently that the toe is done, that it's yours only in memory. But then, one morning, there's a change. You wake up to the fire crackling, your blankets half kicked off, and a dull ache running through your foot like someone's playing a violin on your nerve endings. You shout, loudly. Your mother rushes over, you point to your toe. "It hurts," you gasp, like it's the worst thing that's ever happened. She smiles. She actually smiles, because pain means blood. Pain means warmth. Pain means you might keep the thing after all. It still aches, for days. But now it's your ache. You own it. You flex the toe when no one's looking just to feel it throb. It's the weirdest form of gratitude you've ever experienced. Winter still wants to take pieces of you, but not this one, not yet. The crows come back first. Not in flocks exactly, just 2 or 3 at a time, black against the white sky, circling low and slow over the village like they're scouting for weakness. You see them land near the compost pile, pecking half-heartedly at frozen scraps. You watch one hop onto a fence post and cock its head at you, smug and glossy. They've been gone for weeks. Birds vanish when things get really bad. Their return could be a sign of hope, or something else. The animals can tell before you do. The goat is louder than usual. The chickens scratch more aggressively at their pen. Even the pig, what's left of him, is grumbling in a way that sounds less like hunger and more like warning. Your father says the sky smells wrong. Your sister says she dreamed of wolves. Then, on a morning so grey it feels more like unfinished night, the wind changes. Not in temperature. You've stopped pretending it'll ever feel warm again, but in shape. It hisses now, moves around corners differently. It drags smells with it. Burned wood, pine sap, and something else. Something sour, unnatural. You sense it before you see it. Everyone does. A strange hush falls over the village, one of those silences too complete to be accidental. People glance at the horizon like they're waiting for something to appear, and then it does. Smoke. A thin ribbon of it curling up beyond the southern trees. It's not from your village. You'd know if someone were careless with the hearth or burning waste out of desperation. No, this is distant, controlled, intentional. A fire from somewhere else. A cooking fire? Maybe, or maybe something worse. You don't like that you can't tell. By mid-morning, 3 men ride into the village. Ride, as in horses. Tall ones, with worn saddles and real bridles and blankets that haven't been chewed to shreds. The horses are tired, but they're the healthiest animals you've seen in months. The riders wear layered cloaks, wool and leather, stained but sturdy. They look clean, like they've been indoors, recently. You all gather to watch them approach, not in a hostile way, more like people spotting a comet. Fascinated, suspicious, and very aware of how little control you have over what comes next. One of the men raises a hand in greeting, his fingers bare and chapped. "Travellers," he calls, "no trouble." No one moves. Your Reeve, who spent most of winter hiding behind his door with a spade, finally steps forward. "What do you want?" The lead rider dismounts. He's younger than you expected, mid-20s maybe, with a scar down his jaw and eyes that have seen things you'd rather not imagine. "Rest," he says simply. "A night, maybe 2, then we move on." "From where?" "Does it matter?" He offers a wry smile. "Everywhere." You don't trust him. No one does. But the village is too tired to argue. There's a small stable, barely shelter at all, but the horses are led there. The men are given space in the longhouse by the chapel. You hear whispers all day. Are they scouts, bandits, messengers? One rumour says they're king's men, come to see how many peasants are still breathing. Another says they're carrying sickness. By evening the tension thickens. You gather near the fire, your mother chopping onions with more force than necessary, your father oiling the knife he hasn't needed in months. Your sister pretends she's not listening to every sound outside the cottage. You lie on your side, pretending not to think of wolves. That night one of the travellers sings, a low rolling tune like something from across the sea. You hear it through the cracks in the wall, no words, just melody. It's beautiful, haunting, a song for ghosts. Historically, travellers in winter were rare and risky. The cold made roads impassable, and the threat of bandits was worse when everyone was hungry. But there were still messengers, peddlers, and soldiers who braved the snow. Some carried news, others carried disease. In hard seasons, anyone unfamiliar could mean salvation or disaster. Your quirky fact for tonight. During famines or plagues, some villages posted lookouts specifically to watch for travellers, and some even refused to let strangers enter unless they brought offerings or had proper documents. In extreme cases, travellers were turned away with torches and pitchforks, not out of cruelty, but fear. Sometimes kindness could kill you. There's no scholarly consensus on how villages navigated these interactions. Some records suggest generosity, sheltering pilgrims, feeding vagrants. Others tell darker tales. Strangers attacked, their belongings stolen, their bodies buried in secret beneath the snow. Hospitality was a gamble, one the hungry couldn't always afford. The next morning one of the riders visits your cottage. He knocks politely. When your father opens the door, the man smiles and tips his head. "Heard you have a strong mule," he says. "We're short on one." Your father narrows his eyes. "We don't trade animals." "I'm not asking for a trade," the man replies. "Just a loan." A few miles, then we return him. "We don't loan either." There's a pause. The man doesn't argue, doesn't threaten, just nods and walks away. But the unease doesn't leave. Later you find a dead chicken near the fence, throat torn, not eaten, just killed. Fox, maybe, or something else. That evening the travellers leave, no ceremony, no farewells, just the sound of hooves crunching snow and silence in their wake. They don't take anything, as far as anyone can tell, but you all feel lighter once they're gone. Still, the smoke remains. Days later, curling up from the trees in the south, whispering something you don't understand. A warning? A signal? Or just someone else trying to survive? You stand near the ridge and watch it drift skyward, thinking about those men, about what they've seen, about what else is out there in the frozen world. Then you turn, head back home, and lock the door behind you, just in case. It starts with a cough, one of those shallow, dry ones that echoes too loudly in the stillness of the cottage. At first, no one mentions it. People cough all the time in winter. Smoke, dust, cold air, straw mites, whatever's floating off the goat. It's nothing, just a tickle, just dryness, just something that'll go away. But it doesn't, it spreads. Your sister is the first to really feel it. The next day she can't get out of bed. She's flushed, sweating in the cold, muttering nonsense into the blankets. You sit beside her, dabbing her forehead with damp cloth and watching her eyes roll back like she's trying to escape into her own mind. You try not to panic. This isn't new. Sickness comes every winter. You've made it through before, but something about this feels heavier. By evening your mother starts coughing too. There's no question now, it's in the house. Your grandmother lights 3 candles and sets them in the window. Not for light, for protection. She whispers a prayer under her breath, the same one she said during the fever years, the one that's half Latin and half pure desperation. You remember it. You hated it then too. Your father says it's just a winter flux. It's the air, not the devil. But his face is pale and his lips press so tight they turn white. He moves through the cottage like someone walking through fog. Steady, cautious, not sure what he's about to step on. By the 3rd day you start coughing too. Not much, just enough to make your chest feel hollow. You don't say anything. You keep boiling water, fetching herbs, forcing broth down your sister's throat while she fights you with surprising strength for someone burning up like a torch. The smell changes. The cottage smells like sickness now, like sweat, sour breath, boiled onions, and fear. The fire crackles but brings no comfort. You don't sleep much. The nights blur into long stretches of half-dreaming, half-listening for the next cough, the next groan, the moment something gets worse. And things do get worse. Your sister starts hallucinating. She reaches out for invisible people, talks to your dead aunt, laughs at shadows. Once, she screams, just once, in the middle of the night. It's the worst sound you've ever heard. Sharp, high, inhuman. After that, she sleeps. You can't tell if it's good sleep or just her body giving up on being awake. Historically, illness in winter was as inevitable as snow. The cold weakened the immune system. The smoke-filled homes closed off ventilation, and people slept close, breathed the same air, coughed into the same bedding. A mild sickness could turn deadly in days. There were no antibiotics, no real medicine, just steam, herbs, prayers, and luck. Your quirky fact for the night? Medieval people believed in something called miasma, bad air that carried illness. To ward it off, they hung fragrant herbs from rafters, rosemary, lavender, even garlic tied in braids. Some carried pomanders, little balls of scented wax or spice-stuffed fabric. Others held bits of ambergris or camphor in their mouths, believing it purified their breath. You'd try it, if you had anything to spare. The village responds the way it always does, with wary glances and a widening perimeter. No one comes to your door. No one brings broth or help. That's not cruelty. It's just survival. They've seen what happens when you get too close to a sick household. They've seen whole families vanish over one winter. Still, you're not completely alone. The priest stops by once, dropping a small jar of something from the monastery. A thick paste that smells like burned honey and mint. You're not sure if it's medicine or a dessert gone wrong, but you rub it on your sister's chest anyway. Her breathing eases for a few hours, then the wheezing returns. On the 6th day, your mother begins to shiver uncontrollably. You wrap her in everything, cloaks, wool, blankets, but it doesn't help. Her skin is hot, but she keeps saying she's cold. Her eyes are glassy, and she won't eat. You try to make her laugh, and she just stares at you, mouth slightly open, like she doesn't recognize you. You cry quietly that night, hiding it behind the firewood rack so no one sees. You don't sob. Just let the tears slide down without resistance, like melting. Then somehow your sister starts to recover. It happens slowly. First, she stops mumbling. Then she drinks water without choking. Then one morning, she asks if there's any bread, and you nearly drop the bowl. You run outside and shout into the cold just to hear your own voice bounce back at you. Your mother follows a few days later. She's weaker, slower, her cough still deep and ragged, but she sits up, sips broth. Tells you your hair looks ridiculous, which feels like a blessing. Not everyone in the village is as lucky. You hear the bell ring 3 times, a funeral, then again the next day, and the next. Someone says it's the Thomas family. All of them. Gone in a week. You can't verify it. No one's talking. There's scholarly debate about how common total family death was during winters like this. Some records are vague, others are chillingly specific, listing names, dates, causes. Entire households recorded in parish death rolls as lost to the flux, consumed by winter, or simply gone. Sometimes, no one even buried them until spring. Your family survives. Somehow. The fever moves through like a ghost and then leaves, exhausted and unsatisfied. You come out the other side thinner, tired, fragile, but alive. You no longer take that for granted. That first morning when you wake and realize no one is coughing, you just lie there, listening, not moving, not even breathing for a moment. Then, slowly, you smile. It's the softest moment of the whole winter, the kind that makes you think, maybe we're past the worst of it. You don't say it aloud, of course, so you're not stupid. The snow begins to change, not all at once and not in any dramatic, poetic way. It's still cold, still heavy, still everywhere, but it's different, wetter, denser. The kind that sticks to your boots in sodden clumps and makes your knees ache just from walking. It falls in thick, lazy flakes now, like even the sky is too tired to keep up the hard frost. And when the wind blows, you hear something new, dripping. Just a little. Soft, infrequent. Like a forgotten faucet somewhere above the world has started to leak. You notice it first on the roof. A slow, steady rhythm of meltwater trickling off the thatch and pattering against the frozen earth. Then from the trees, icicles, once frozen stiff and menacing, now glisten with beads of water that slowly stretch and drop one by one into the snowbanks below. Each drip is a tiny rebellion, a signal that winter might be loosening its grip. Your mother notices too. She doesn't say anything, but you catch her standing by the window longer than usual. She's holding a bowl of broth, cooling it for your sister, but she's not looking at it. She's watching the eaves, listening. Her face is unreadable. Hope, maybe, or dread. Sometimes it's hard to tell the difference. Of course, everyone's talking about it. At the well, near the chapel, in whispered conversations by the fire. Do you think it's starting? Is the freeze breaking? Could it really be the thaw? The older villagers are sceptical. They've seen false springs before. A few days of softness, then another snowstorm like punishment for daring to hope. But even they admit it feels different this time. Heavier clouds, milder wind, bird song. You actually hear bird song. It's faint, just a few chirps at dawn. You think you might be imagining it until your brother hears it too and nearly drops the kindling he's carrying. You both look at each other, wide-eyed, like you've just seen a ghost wave hello. The animals notice it first, naturally. They always do. The goat becomes restless, pacing in her pen, scraping her hooves at the ground like she's digging for spring. The chickens squawk more loudly and start pecking at the door when they think it's time to be let out. Even the pig, what's left of him after a long winter of tight rations, gives a little grunt that sounds suspiciously like enthusiasm. Then, one morning you see the earth. It's not much, just a patch. A muddy, soggy thumbprint of brown near the tree line where the snow has melted enough to reveal what lies beneath. Dead leaves, old grass, the remnants of something that once lived. You kneel beside it, press your hand into it, feel the cold seep into your skin. But it's earth, not snow, not ice. Earth. You don't realise how long you've been crouched there until your knees start to cramp. You stand, stretch, and whisper. It's starting. Just to yourself. Just to the trees. Historically, the thaw was both a relief and a problem. Yes, it meant winter was breaking. But it also meant mud. Flooding. Roofs collapsing from the weight of melting snow. Roads turning into rivers. And every hidden mess winter had tucked away. Rotting food, dead animals, forgotten garbage, suddenly came back to the surface. The air would stink. The houses would leak. The joy of spring would arrive wearing a dirty, wet cloak of inconvenience. Your quirky fact for tonight. In some medieval communities, people mark the first visible thaw with a small feast, called Mud Day, or Earth Fast. They'd gather and eat the last of the pickled vegetables, then stomp into the softened soil just to feel something other than snow beneath their feet. Some even sang songs meant to wake the worms, inviting them back to the fields. It sounds ridiculous, until you've been frozen for 3 months. Then it sounds like religion. The debate among historians is whether these early signs of spring were seen as sacred or merely practical. For some, the thaw marked the end of Lent and the first steps toward Easter, a spiritual rebirth. For others, it meant backbreaking labour, digging out ditches, mending fences, and patching roofs before the rains came. Spring wasn't a time for rest. It was a sprint, beginning before your legs had fully thawed. You spend the next few days watching everything with suspicion. Every drip, every patch of exposed ground, every morning when the frost isn't quite so sharp. You check the sky constantly, sniff the air, watch the trees for any sign of bud or bloom. Nothing yet, but it's coming. Your family feels it too. Your mother starts talking about the garden, idly, but more often. Your father sharpens tools that haven't been touched since Michaelmas. Your sister, who hasn't left the cottage in weeks, asks if she can go sit by the window. She doesn't look strong yet, but the fact that she wants sunlight again is enough to make your chest ache with relief. The Reeve organises a path clearing, half an excuse to do something, half a test of whether the roads are passable. You join in. Everyone does. You dig and stomp and hack at the snowbanks, forming channels for the meltwater to escape instead of pooling around homes and flooding the root cellars. It's exhausting. Your boots sink deep into the mud and your gloves soak through, but you keep going. Because movement means momentum, and momentum is the one thing winter hates. One afternoon the sun actually feels warm, just for a moment, just a tiny shimmer against your cheek as you look up, squinting through the thin veil of clouds. It's not heat, but it's not nothing. You raise your hand, hold it there, and let yourself believe it. Then comes the smell. It hits you unexpectedly. Not rot, not smoke, but life. That strange, rich, earthy scent of damp soil and decomposing leaves. It's not pleasant exactly, but it's real. It's what the world smells like when it's trying to come back. You breathe it in like it's the first clean air in months, and you realise you're going to make it. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The snow won't win this year, not this time. You wake up to birdsong. Not the hesitant chirps from a few mornings ago, but a full-blown, unapologetic chorus. High-pitched, urgent, messy, loud. It's coming from somewhere just beyond the cottage, probably the thicket where the brambles huddle like gossiping old men. You blink into the half-light, listening. The sound feels like a mistake. Too joyful, too alive, but it keeps going. You smile before you even realise you're doing it, and then you hear water. Actual running water. Not the slow drip of melt or the gurgle of a thawing roof beam, but a proper stream. You bolt from bed so fast your mother startles. She's sitting by the hearth, mending a torn sleeve, and she watches you rush to the door like she's just remembered what it means to have children with working limbs. Outside, the world is changed. The snow isn't gone, not entirely, but it's cracked open, like a shell. There are great hunks of it collapsing into themselves, dark soil yawning from underneath like it's been holding its breath all season. Patches of brown and green peek through the white, timid but real. The trees, once stiff and silent, sway slightly in the breeze. You can smell sap in the air. The stream, your stream, is running. Narrow, quick, bubbling over rocks that haven't been visible since the first frost back in November. It carries twigs, mud, the occasional soggy leaf. You crouch by it, fingers twitching to touch the water. You hesitate, then dip your hand in. It's ice cold. Of course it is, but it's moving. It's alive. Your brother comes running after you, and then your sister, who has only just started walking on her own again. She's bundled in 3 layers and still pale, but she's smiling. You all stand there, gaping at the water like it's some holy relic. Maybe it is. Later that day, the whole village feels lighter. Not because anything major has changed. Most of the snow is still here, the wind still bites, and the food stores are nearly gone. But because everyone's moving again. Doors are open, tools come out of storage. A few kids drag a broken sled up the hill, not to slide, but to haul firewood. You help your father patch the roof. The section over the pantry started leaking when the last ice storm melted. You both climb up there, careful on the still slick tiles, and replace the broken slats. It's hard work. Your fingers go numb, but you don't care. Every swing of the hammer feels like a sentence in a victory speech. By sunset, the village smells different. Damp, smoky, a little sour. All the scents winter had buried are rising back up. Animal waste, old straw, forgotten scraps. It's not pleasant, but it's real. Life has texture again. You even spot a worm in the garden bed wriggling through thawed soil. Your sister names it Gregory. Your mother says it's a sign. Historically, this stage of the thaw, sometimes called the break, was one of the most dangerous and exhilarating parts of the medieval calendar. It wasn't the end of hardship, far from it. But it was the moment people knew they'd probably made it. The roads began to reappear. The livestock started grazing again. You could go to the woods for more than firewood. You could hunt, forage, maybe even spot a sprouting herb if you squinted hard enough. Your quirky fact for tonight. In some regions, villagers held a turning feast on the first day. Water returned to the stream or river that ran through their settlement. It wasn't about abundance, it was symbolic. They'd pass around a single cup of stream water, offer toasts to spring, and sing half-remembered songs about growing things. Some carved the date into beams or trees. Others lit a new fire using only dry sticks and breath, swearing they wouldn't use the old hearth again until spring truly took hold. Scholars love to debate whether these were true rituals or just folklore made up later by nostalgic scribes. Either way, it says something about the human need to mark the moment when survival shifts from maybe to probably. You don't need ceremony, you just need signs. Over the next few days, those signs multiply. The ice on the river splits. Not fully, but wide enough to send chunks drifting downstream like broken teeth. The animals are louder, hungrier, more stubborn. The chickens try to escape every time you open the coop. The goat kicks over her bucket twice in one morning. Even the mule acts like he's itching to sprint. You know the feeling. Your mother starts making plans for the spring garden. She sits by the hearth, sketching little plots in the soot on the stone, muttering about leeks and cabbage. You and your siblings take turns bringing her whatever seed bundles survived the frost. Most are wrinkled, some are probably dead, but a few, just a few, still rattle with promise. There's laughter again, not forced, not brittle, actual, careless laughter. Your brother tells a joke so stupid your father chokes on his tea. Your sister trips over her own scarf and lands in a puddle and howls with laughter before anyone can even ask if she's hurt. You throw a snowball at your cousin and it accidentally hits the reeve. He glares, then throws one back. You find your grandmother sitting outside one afternoon knitting with bare hands. "You'll freeze," you say. She shrugs. "Let the wind bite." "I've got blood enough left." You sit with her for a while, not speaking, just breathing, in and out. Later, you help clear the fields. The snow's too deep to plant, but you rake the top layer aside, exposing the flattened stalks from last year's harvest. It's grueling work. Every muscle aches. But it's a good kind of tired. The kind that says you're moving towards something. The stars are brighter now, sharper. You stand outside one evening looking up, and for the first time in months you don't feel like the sky is pressing down on you. It's open, wide, patient. The thaw doesn't fix everything. You still have weeks of hard labour ahead. The snow might come back for one last cruel joke. The food stores are low, and your frostbitten toe still hurts when the wind shifts. But something has changed. You've made it through. The worst of it anyway. You survived a medieval winter. Barely. And yeah, if this were a video game, your health bar would be flashing red. Your clothes would be patched with moss, and you'd have trauma points for days. But you're alive, you're here, and so is spring, so here you are. Alive, dirty, exhausted, thinner than you'd like, and probably harbouring some sort of mild respiratory issue. But you made it. You survived a medieval winter, which frankly is kind of a miracle. No central heating, no vitamin C, no emergency blankets, just smarts, firewood, and the questionable advice of your grandmother. You know now what most people don't, that winter isn't just a season, it's a siege, a slow, creeping one. It tests you quietly, inch by inch. It wears down your body, then your nerves, then your hope. But it doesn't get everyone, it just waits to see who stops fighting back. And yet, even in that endless frost, there were moments, weren't there? The stew nights, the quiet prayers, that weird moment with the goat. You laughed, you cried, you maybe lost a toe, and still, spring came, like it always somehow does. There's no dramatic ending here, no trumpets or banners or grand reward for your survival. The snow didn't part like the Red Sea. The villagers didn't throw a feast with 7 courses and dancing bears. Life just keeps going. You dig, you plant, you breathe a little easier. But the world feels warmer now, not just the air but everything. People smile more, you sleep deeper, you don't wince when you hear wind at the window, you even start to hum a little when you walk. You look back at that long season and think, it didn't get me. Not this time. And that thought alone is worth something. So go ahead, let the blanket wrap tighter, let the hum of that fan lull you into soft stillness. You've done enough for tonight, tomorrow will come, and with it, more sun. You've earned your rest.